and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Commissioners Reorganization Meeting of January 6, 2014. We actually have two meetings tonight. We have our reorganization meeting, and then we will adjourn and then have a regular business meeting. Tonight we are fortunate to have with us the Honorable Judge Ann Osborne of the Delco Court of Common Pleas. Not only is she a Radnor resident, she is also the wife of our elected treasurer, John Osborne, so it's very special to have her administer our oaths tonight. We have the 2nd, 4th, and 6th Ward Commissioners being sworn in. The 6th Ward Commissioner, Don Curley, is not here tonight. Oh, well, he will be here tonight. He had a prior commitment that he couldn't get out of, so he's coming at around 8. However, as I understand it, I believe he has already been administered the oath before this meeting, so he can come right in and go ahead and start business. And then after those swearing-ins, we will then have the oath given to the Township Treasurer. Now, I see that Rich's Bible holder has just arrived, so we can go ahead and, mine haven't arrived yet, so hopefully by the time we get to me. So let's go ahead and meet up front, and we will start to administer our oaths.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. To begin, I'd like to thank the Board of Commissioners for the invitation tonight. It's always an honor and a pleasure to assist in establishing governments in the sense of administering oaths. So it's my honor tonight to begin to administer the oath of office to 2nd Ward Commissioner-elect Richard Booker. So, Mr. Booker, if you would place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Richard F. Booker,
I, Richard F. Booker,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
the Constitution of the United States of Pennsylvania,
and the Home Rule Charter of Radnor Township,
and the Home Rule Charter of Radnor Township,
and that I will discharge the duties of Commissioner of Radnor Township
and that I will discharge the duties of Commissioner of Radnor Township
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
That's all we got. Thank
So
you.
help you God. All right, we need to sign this. Anything you'd like to say? Do you have anything you'd like to say? Okay.
I'd like to thank my wife. I'd like to thank all my supporters and the folks in the 2nd Ward who elected me, and just want to assure everyone that I will represent all of the people of the ward. So thanks very much for being here, and thanks very much for your faith. Thanks.
Rich. Congratulations. Appreciate all of you. Congratulations.
It's now my honor and pleasure to introduce and administer the oath of office to Elaine Schaefer, Commissioner-elect of the 4th Ward, correct? All right, and would you tell us, please, who's here with you tonight?
This is my son, Matthew Schaefer, who's 15, my son, Ellis Schaefer, who's 19, and my husband, John.
All right, good evening to all. And who's going to hold the Bible? Okay. Please place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and repeat after me. I, Elaine P. Schaefer,
I, Elaine P. Schaefer,
do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
and the Home Rule Charter of Radnor Township,
and the Home Rule Charter of Radnor Township,
and that I will discharge the duties
and I will discharge the duties
of Commissioner of Radnor Township
of Commissioner of Radnor Township
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Would you like to say something? No. Okay.
You can do Rich, do it in the back, that's fine. Congratulations.
And the next oath of office, it's my honor and pleasure to administer to the treasurer-elect of Radnor Township. I need the Bible. All right. Oh, wait a minute. Introduce your Bible holder. Bible holder.
I'd like to introduce my daughter, Sarah Armstrong. She's my Bible holder and a great supporter.
All right. Place your left hand on the Bible, please. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, John E. Osborne,
I, John E. Osborne,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
and the Home Rule Charter of Radnor Township,
and the Home Rule Charter of Radnor Township,
and that I will discharge the duties
and that I will discharge the duties
of Treasurer of Radnor Township
of Treasurer of Radnor Township
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
John, congratulations. Thanks. My phone pictures here.
You have to sign before you can shake.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I thought he was heading out, it's my fault.
What, am I supposed to say something? Would you like to sign something?
Yes, you have to sign this. And I have to sign it too. Would you like to speak?
Thank you. Huh?
Would you like to speak?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody who supported me and support Radnor Township. I will pay attention to what's going on around here and report to you as need be. Thank you very much.
Okay, on to the election of officers. First, we will address the election of the president of the board, and I'd like to call for nominations.
I would like to move the nomination of Elaine Paul Schaefer as President of the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township.
Second?
Are there any other nominations? All right, is there any board comments about this or staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes by a vote of 5-1 with Commissioner Curley absent. Next, we will have the election of vice president. Can I have nominations?
Move
I'd
the, move
ahead.
John Nagel.
No,
Oh,
Jim Higgins.
oh, Jim Higgins. You didn't tell me to change program. You guys got to give me the
I
new
would like to
program.
move the nomination of Jim Higgins.
All right, I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? Is there any board comment or staff comment, public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes, and Jim Higgins is elected to vice president by a vote of 5-1, Commissioner Curley absent. All right, we have some more oaths to be administered of both the president and vice president. You want to borrow a Bible? Hold. I do have a. Who goes first? Vice Chair.
All right. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James Higgins,
I, James Higgins,
of Radnor Township, Pennsylvania,
of Radnor Township, Pennsylvania,
being duly elected as Vice President of the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township,
having been duly elected as Vice President of the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township,
Delaware County,
Delaware County,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
and the Home Rule Charter and ordinances of Radnor Township.
and the Home Rule Charter and ordinances of Radnor Township, Pennsylvania.
I will,
I will,
during my term of office,
during my term of office,
perform the duties of my office with fidelity.
perform the duties of my office with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anything you'd like to say? Would you like to say anything?
I'm very honored to be elected. And I'm very happy, again, to be serving as Vice President under Elaine Schaefer. She's now going to start her second year. I'll start my second year in my position. And I think she's done a great job administering and managing the meetings. She does it with fairness and equanimity and confidence. So I hope our board this year will have a good year and be fair and handle all of our issues on a fair basis and give every member of the public his or her due and an opportunity to voice opinions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bible crew is back. All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Elaine,
Elaine Paul Schaefer,
of Radnor Township, Pennsylvania,
of Radnor Township, Pennsylvania,
being duly elected the President of the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township,
being duly elected the President of the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township,
Delaware County,
Delaware County,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
and the Home Rule Charter and ordinances of Radnor Township.
and the Home Rule Charter and ordinances of Radnor Township.
I will,
During my term of office,
perform the duties of my office
perform the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Okay, first I'd like to say thank you to Judge Osborne for taking the time to do this tonight. We really appreciate it. And I'd also like to say thank you to my colleagues for re-electing me. I feel very honored, and I have a great deal of gratitude for another year of leadership. I'd like to continue to run this board, or at least try to, with an air of respect and civility. And for 2014, I would like to see us improve. I think we all would like to see us improve the length of some of our longer meetings. That's going to be the goal of the year. I think we can all agree that after 11 p.m., the quality of our debate really starts to plummet. So that's something we're going to work on for 2014. I'd also just like to make the observation that we're starting off 2014 in a position of a very good financial position and a very good operational position. And I would like to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge our staff for that, because it really is their doing. Our management has been excellent, professional, extraordinary, really, over the last 3 years, and has really brought us a long way. We all know that. and it's starting off 2014. It's a nice opportunity to recognize that once again. And the non-management staff especially has really, I've said this many times before, but I'm going to say it again because it bears repeating. They have really gotten through and risen to the occasion of all the transition that we have had in the last 3 years just wonderfully, and we all so appreciate it. They have adapted, they've been flexible, and they continue to be really the best municipal staff in this region, probably in this state, as you all saw this last weekend with all of the excellent services that we got with our reduced staff. So thank you to our staff for their perseverance and really rising to the occasion through the transition, and thank you to our management. Okay, next we need to appoint the chair and members of our standing committees. It's a very long list, so I'm not going to go through every one. It's on the website, and it's also printed out on the table over there if you'd like to take a look at it. So may I have a motion to approve of those chairs and committees?
So moved.
I think you just appoint them. I don't think we make a motion, do we? They're your appointment.
Yeah.
Okay.
By
By
resolution?
resolution?
I think you want to
Okay.
make a motion
All right,
to
okay.
appoint him.
Better that way.
Yeah.
Okay, did you move?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have John Fisher moving, Bill Spengler seconding. Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 6-0 with Commissioner Curley not here yet. 10 more minutes. Next, we have the reappointments to the advisory boards and commissions. And they are listed on the agenda.
John Fisher? Yep.
Yeah, why don't you take them?
All right, I'll move to reappoint Bruce Wilson to the Civil Service Commission, Gary Parkin to the Code Appeals Board, Ernie Shapiro and Brian Kirby to the Citizens Communication Council, Susan Stern to the Planning Commission, Joshua Hilbert and Stephen Elliott to the Environmental Advisory Council.
Second?
Okay, is there any commissioner comment?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, and this is certainly nothing about Susan Stern. However, being that she was recently elected to the school board and has joined the school board, I believe that the spirit of the charter, if not the letter of the charter, is that folks who are serving in other elected positions would not be on our boards and commissions. Again, I understand that that's not the letter of the charter, but it's the spirit. And conversations I had with Joe Kimball, for example, about the charter, and with some of the group that was referred to as the New Look Republicans from back at the time the charter was put forth, this was one of the key elements of the charter revision, was to do away with a combination of undue influence and also cronyism. So again, and Susan, I thought I saw you out there. This is certainly not about you. You've done a masterful job and been really great. So anyway, I would like to not endorse Susan.
So would you like to make a motion to that effect and see if it carries?
I'd like to move that we not reappoint Susan Stern.
Second.
Okay.
Well, I'll address the issue. I'm going to vote against the motion. I have a lot of respect for Susan, but she has been elected to our school board. And if you read the Home Rule Charter, and our solicitor has advised us, the precise wording of the charter does not bar her from sitting as a school board member and also sitting as a planning commission member. Nevertheless, I don't think it's right. And I'm going to vote for her, but I don't think it's the right thing. And John Nagel is correct. The history here is not a very good history. There was a time in this township, there are a few people here old enough to remember this, where we had people serving in dual capacities as committee people, partisan Republican committee people, and also serving in as employees of the township. And so that was one reason why in 1976 we enacted the charter clause that prohibits this dual service. So
But
that's
I would
basically
just-
how I feel.
I would just like to state that 2 members of the school board serve on our Park and Rec board. No, I know it's special, but this is special too. So, I mean, if you want to be consistent, then we shouldn't have 2 members from the school board serving on our Park and Rec board. So.
Bill, the members
that's
of the
fine.
park.
I don't want to debate.
I'm
I
going-
just made my comment. I'm
Yeah.
voting yes. That's it.
Yeah, and I'll be supporting Sue Stern's reappointment because she already was on the Planning Commission, and then she was elected by at-large to serve on the school board. So the residents have decided to put her on the school board, and that there's no effective cronyism if she was already serving on the Planning Commission and then was elected at-large by the electorate. Now, if it were the other way around, I might consider, the context that John has put forward, but I'll be supporting her.
I, too, am going to vote against John Nagel's motion. The letter of the law does not prohibit it. I understand your argument and your feeling about the spirit of the law, but in my opinion, our Home Rule Charter was drafted very carefully, and it was very carefully sculpted out exactly what the conflicts would be and what positions you could hold, and this one was not precluded. So I think it's within a safe zone, and I think she's done an extraordinary job on the board. And I also think I believe that Ms. Stern would probably not have run for school board had she known it would mean that she'd have to step off Planning Commission, because she feels very strongly about it. So I'm going to support her for it. And is there any other commissioner comment?
Yes, I have. Just for the audience, John, you and I talked about this, but I guess I'm not exactly clear on why this is not in violation of the code. Doesn't it preclude serving in these 2 roles simultaneously? I thought it did say that.
No.
What does it say? What is the language? Can you?
You have the code in front of, your charter in front of you, Rich?
Well, just give me the. No, I don't think I do. No.
Okay, well,
Give me the sum and substance anyway.
well, starting with the specific language, it's in section 904. A5, other government service. No township official elected or appointed to an elective office under this charter. So stop right there. Planning Commission's not an elective office under this charter. And no full-time township employee shall hold any other, she's not a township employee, shall hold any other township employment or other elective or appointed township position. So, that says it all. I don't think you have to read any further than that. So there's no, school district director is not an elected position under this charter. So there's no conflict there. It's an elected position, but it's not an elected position under this charter. It's pretty clear to me. I don't really understand the mystery. One of the things that everyone should also realize is the municipality's planning code does not prohibit an elected official from sitting on it as a member of the Planning Commission. And that was changed some number of years ago, where you can have on a Planning Commission, except for your charter, because your charter would preclude that. But if you're a first-class township or a second-class township, you can have elected officials on your Planning Commission, your township officials. So there's some sense that, they're not always conflicting positions when it comes to the planning code.
So what is the school board, what's the governing document for the school board? It's not the charter,
School code,
school code.
yeah. Totally separate entity. Just like county government separate. You've got a
Is-
home rule. You have a home rule charter there, and the different categories of cities and townships and boroughs all are governed by separate codes.
Okay, do
So
we have
thi-
any other commissioner
This is
comment?
your code.
Any other comment from commissioners? Any other staff comment? And what we're talking about the amendment now that was made by Commissioner Nagel. Is there any public comment? All right, I'll go ahead and call the vote on the motion that Commissioner Nagel made to not reappoint Susan Stern. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed?
Opposed?
And the motion failed by a vote of 2 to 4. Now we have a motion on the table put forth by John Fisher that was to approve the rest of, all of the appointments. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other commissioner comment, any staff comment, or any public comment on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
And that passes by a vote of 4 to 1 with 1 abstention, John Nagel abstaining. All right, then. Number 12, appointments to our boards and commissions. John Fisher?
Thank you. I'll move to appoint Mark Zwagerman to the Harb, sorry about that, and Charles Boshin to represent the second ward seat on the Stormwater Committee.
Second?
Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6 to nothing.
And I'll make the announcement of the vacancies on the various boards and commissions. At this point, we have 1 vacancy on the Board of Health, 1 vacancy on the Shade Tree Commission, 2 vacancies on the Park and Recreation Board, 2 vacancies on the Citizen Communications Council, and 1 vacancy on the Ethics Board. Send your letter of interest to Bob Zinkowski, Township Manager, 301 Ivan Avenue, Wayne, Pennsylvania, 19087.
Okay, that concludes our reorganization meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn?
Second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
6 to 0, we are adjourned. And now we will move on to our regular Board of Commissioners meeting for Monday, January 6th. Before we open with public participation, I would like to announce that we have 2 items that are coming off the agenda tonight. First is item E regarding emergency lighting equipment for our K-9 unit. And the second is item I, which was a caucus discussion of 115 Stafford Avenue LLC. That will be on the January 27th agenda instead. Okay, as always, we invite public participation at the beginning of the meeting for those who cannot stay during the meeting as a courtesy. And I'd like to remind everyone for all comments during the meeting that we are trying to abide by the soft 5-minute rule, which means after 5 minutes, you will be gently reminded that it has been 5 minutes, and out of respect for everyone's time, you will be asked to wrap up. Please come up.
Hi, good evening. Kate Long, Friends to Preserve Radnor. Friends to Preserve Radnor respectfully asks that the Board of Commissioners incorporate the revisions recommended by the Planning Commission at their meeting on December 3rd, 2013. The version being presented tonight does not include their recommendations of December 3rd, which are based largely on the work of Friends to Preserve Radnor. Funded by donations from Radnor residents, the Friends to Preserve Radnor rewrite of the ordinance was prepared by our team of David Honorato, our lawyer, and Evan Riker, our land planner. This rewrite reflects our goals to preserve the integrity of our suburban township and to preserve our quality of life. This is for our homes, our neighborhoods, our township, our residents, for now and the future. We urge you to please incorporate the Planning Commission revisions before moving forward with the hearing date. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good evening. My name's Maya Van Rossum. I'm here in my capacity as the Delaware Riverkeeper and also as a resident of Radnor Township on South Roberts Road. And I do appreciate the advanced time to speak. I wouldn't take advantage of it unless I really needed to this evening. But I'm also here to speak about the CICD ordinance change and to suggest that I think it's premature for you to take that to hearing and to be voting on a hearing schedule tonight. The draft CICD ordinance that you are voting to move to hearing does not include some very important recommendations made by the Planning Commission, and it also doesn't include consideration of the recommendations made by my organization, the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, which the Planning Commission urged you to consider in the final crafting of the ordinance before you moved to hearing. With regards to the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, there are basically 3 areas where we believe that enhancements are needed in the ordinance to make it truly work for this township. Enhanced buffer requirements for streams, that the preserved open space obligation be tied to building coverage rather than impervious coverage, because it's total impervious coverage that has your stormwater impacts, your environmental impacts, your community impacts. Building coverage is a totally different beast. And that it include enhanced stormwater requirements, requirements that are better than those in the Radnor Township ordinance, and suggesting that those who would avail themselves of the enhanced construction opportunities under the CICD should also then give to Radnor Township residents some enhanced assurances that they will do a better job when it comes to stormwater. I would suggest to you that Villanova's promises that it's going to do a good job with regards to this project on stormwater is not an excuse for the township not to include the enhanced stormwater obligations in its ordinance. The fact that Villanova says it's going to do a better job doesn't mean that they will when it comes down to it, and it also doesn't mean that every other facility that could college that could take advantage of this ordinance will also be so gracious. So the CICD does give enhanced building opportunities. We should also make sure that it's giving enhanced stormwater protections to Radnor Township. And I would suggest that if you use the suggestion by Villanova that you don't need to include enhanced stormwater practices in the CICD ordinance because they promised to do a good job on their project where the parking lots are, then we're actually talking about Villanova's project. We're not talking about a zoning ordinance change, and that's spot zoning, right? So this really is about an ordinance that applies to Villanova and several other facilities in the township. So let's treat it that way. Enhanced building opportunity, enhanced stormwater obligations. I'm not clear, really. There are a lot of problems between my office and the township on what information gets received from me and to me. So all I wanted to bring to you tonight was a copy of the actual revisions that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network suggests go into the zoning ordinance change. They're extensive on the stormwater front, but on the other fronts, it's sometimes just a word change that can make a critical difference. So I did want to provide that for you tonight. I also have providing an email that I got from our consulting engineer, which explains to you why Radnor Township's existing stormwater ordinance doesn't do all we need it to do for Radnor Township and for this CICD ordinance proposal. Radnor Township's stormwater ordinance does a pretty good job on groundwater recharge. It does a pretty good job on water quality, but it doesn't address total volume. And total volume is the issue when we're talking about the Villanova project, when we're talking about the CICD development, and frankly, when we're talking about all development projects in Radnor Township. So I just wanted to, it's a very simple one-pager, and I thought it would be helpful to inform the conversation as it moves forward. And I hope I did the 5 minutes.
Okay.
Should I just give these to Bob, all the copies?
You can hand them up here, Will.
It's on reused paper, the one email. So when you look at the other side, you're going to see something about the state of Delaware. Ignore me.
Okay. Always recycling. Okay, thank you, Maya. Is there any other public comment before the meeting? Okay, I would like to announce that we had an executive session immediately preceding this Board of Commissioners meeting on January 6th, at which we discussed items involving personnel. Next, we have a presentation by our Environmental Advisory Council about our Geese issue, and I see some members of the EAC here, which come on up, and we would love to hear what you have to say about our Geese issue.
Thank you. My name is Josh Hilbert, and I'm the chair of the Environmental Advisory Council. And at the request of the Board of Commissioners this summer, we have undertaken a research project on the environmental effects of Canada geese here in our township. This was a subject that was brought to the table primarily due to a very large number of geese that were noticed by some residents in some township parks, and the droppings that go along with those geese were a were noted to be a nuisance to some. So before the township embarked on a population control project or an effort, they wisely said, well, let's see what kind of environmental effects these geese are having, so we know, how hard to attack the problem. So, with that said, you know what? I forgot to start with the. I'm not sure if this is ready to go or not, Jim. This might not work. I'll put that in. I'll just keep going. See if you can bring that up. I want to point out that Radnor has what are called resident Canada geese. That's different than migratory Canada geese. The resident Canada geese spend their entire life cycle here in our area. They might move around within the township or within the county, but they do not go to Canada. In the spring, they nest, and that's often at the water's edge. In the brooding season, when they're raising their young, that's in the spring as well, spring into early summer. That's spent in lawn areas near water's edge as well. The geese like the water's edge area because it provides an escape route from predators. You'll see that almost in most of their life cycle phases, they'll spend at water's edge to have a little escape route. In the summer, they molt. That's when they replace their flight feathers. During that molting season, which lasts, I think it might last 2 months almost, they cannot fly. And they'll also spend it near the water as well. But they like those fields that are near the water. So they can eat in the fields and then escape to the water if necessary. Finally, in the August, their flight feathers are back. They're able to fly again. They will move away from the water then, and they will go to large fields. They like short grass fields where there's predators can't hide in the grass, and the short grass gives them plenty to eat. And they'll spend all fall and winter in those fields. And I should note that that's when I have found that the droppings problem really escalates in the fall and the winter on our soccer fields here in the township. Adverse environmental effects. There are two possible adverse environmental effects. There's not a lot of research that states that this is a major, a major environmental problem. But we should note that they will trample and compact the soils around ponds because that's where there's a lot of traffic in that area from the geese, and that'll kill the grass and the plants that are right up against the water's edge, and subject those banks to erosion over time. The fecal matter from the geese, it may be a contamination problem. The research was not strong on this, but it certainly can contribute to excess algal growth because the droppings have nutrients, and that tends to promote algae. Those algae blooms, as they rise and fall, can end up depleting oxygen levels, which can affect other plants in these ponds and fish and other invertebrates, and then downstream water quality from the effluent of the pond. We focused on primarily two problem areas, the Willows Pond being one, and the Beau Connor and Warren Philippone parks. At Willows, we occasionally saw 30 to 50 geese on several occasions at once. We found moderate to large quantity of droppings, and we noticed those compacted soils and the trampled and the killed grass around the edges. In the sports parks, there was no geese there in June or October, which we found interesting. And then I made a late October visit, and there was tons of them everywhere, and there was droppings everywhere. So that's the background. I want to turn it over to Dan Meyer. He's going to clue you in on what we've done in the past and what might be done here in the future.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about first a little bit about what the township's done in the past with the issue, and then talk about some of the possible solutions that we've identified.
I spoke with a firm, the Goose guys, which had a contract with the township for about 10 years. And then I also got some information from Tammy Cohen, the Parks Department. And during that 10 or 11-year period, the township was paying anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a month to the Goose guys firm. This is a firm with certified dog handlers, trained dogs that are trained to harass the geese. And, not only will they chase after them on the land, when they fly into the water for safety, the dog goes right in after them, and that's the way you can scare them away. In addition to that, they did some egg addling and nest removal, and I'll discuss the egg addling a little bit later. But they were here at least 28 times a month, sometimes more than once a day, every day except Sundays and holidays, and if there was a certain amount of snow on the ground. A little bit of a discrepancy between how the township staff viewed the success and how the Goose guys viewed the success. Township felt that it just wasn't being effective over time, that the geese were not going away, whereas the Goose guys said when they would show up, there'd typically be a dozen or less geese there, and to them that's a successful program. An interesting thing to note here that, in this solution, you're just chasing the geese away, right? So they're going to land somewhere else, and the Goose guy recalled hearing that the residents of those upstream ponds, I believe that's like Ravenscliff or Inverary, they'd get increased calls from there like, hey, where are all these geese coming from? Well, that's what happens when you chase them from one place to the next. Don't need to read all this. This is from Penn State's Natural Resources Extension. Just a couple really important points is that to manage this, you've just got to stay on top of it. And also, once you've gotten them away from an area, you've got to change that area somehow so that it's no longer attractive to the geese, or they're just going to come back. As long as there's no threat to them, as long as it's providing food and protection to them, then they're going to come back. Want to talk just quickly about some of the things we found that we don't really think are effective or desirable. You can buy these plywood cutouts that are shaped like wolves and bobcats and other natural prey. You can buy owl decoys, but very quickly these birds realize, like, okay, thing's not coming at me. I can go eat next to it, and it's not doing anything to me. So they tend to have a very short lifespan of effectiveness. There's some talk of using swans too, because they're territorial, that they could also aid in chasing away geese. But the internet research and the experts that we talked to also seem to think that was fairly ineffective. The kind of swans that what you want to use are a non-native species, and it's kind of understood that you don't try and control an invasive species by introducing another invasive species. It just tends not to work. Like geese, they can be aggressive towards humans. They'll cause the same issues with trampling soil and leaving droppings. The last item on the list there, we just can't endorse, which would be to capture these geese and exterminate them. The reality is we're maintaining a landscape that's attracting this wildlife, and we just can't endorse, attracting this wildlife and then slaughtering it. So that's something we would take off the table. Now I want to talk about some of the things that we think we should look at, the township should look at further. I think regardless of what we do, we really ought to do something to discourage people from feeding geese. As fun as that is to do with your little kids, it's a great attractant. These animals, it's a lot easier for them to just take handouts than have to go searching for food. The state and the county have ordinances for state and county parks that prohibit that. I don't believe there's something like that for the township parks, and I don't know that we need an ordinance, but I think some signage and maybe some educational information on the website, the township website, might help educate the population, the citizens, about why that's not a good thing to do. So some of the things that based on internet research and talking to the experts, these are the things that seem to work. Again, we're at harassment with the trained dogs. I think it's important to notice here in the second bullet that the goose guy, the contact at the goose guy says this is a control method, it's not a permanent solution. So all you're doing is periodically scaring these geese away. As soon as the dogs go away, the geese come back. So it's not solving the problem on a permanent basis. And then there's other things. You can have noisemakers and things making loud explosive noises. I don't know how keen the residents would be on that, whether they're visiting the park or live near the park. I mentioned egg addling before. Basically, this is certified professionals. It basically involves dipping the geese eggs into vegetable-based oil, and that prevents the egg from developing and hatching. The eggs are left in the nest because if you take the eggs out, the geese will typically just lay more eggs. And Josh mentioned that the geese are resident here. They're here year-round. A mating pair of geese can add 4 or 5 geese to the flock every year. So you can imagine if you have 40 geese, if that's 20 mating pairs, I mean, you're generating a whole lot of geese every year. And then if you leave those eggs in the nest, they typically won't lay again. They'll just, sit there until nothing happens and then go through their usual molting period. So the thing that we're thinking is maybe something that we should investigate further is habitat modification. As I said, the geese are there because there's an abundant food source. It's this short turf grass. They love to eat the shoots coming up. There's the protection of the pond to fly if there's any perceived danger. So there's a couple ways to do that. One would be to put tall plantings around the pond that breaks their sight line with the pond, and they feel that it's less of a safe escape route. The other thing would be to replace the existing grass with grasses that aren't a food source for them. The third thing, you can put fences, and there's actually a way of putting like a wire mesh across the water surface so that they can't land there. We don't really think that's a viable solution here, given the size of the pond. This is just a photo of what a pond might look like, where you've really created a vegetative buffer around it. It basically makes it there's nowhere for the geese to land, and again it creates a sightline obstacle for them to get to the pond. Obviously, a huge expense involved here, both in getting the landscape there and then maintaining it. This is something that we think holds some promise. There's a local firm called Native Return. They've developed this grass blend. They actually did originally for airfields to discourage geese from landing at airports. And it's a blend of non-invasive grasses that are just not palatable to geese. They have alkaloids in them and other chemicals that the geese just don't want to eat them. The natural grass will grow to be about 6 to 7 inches high. You could leave it like that, or you could mow it once a month to give it sort of a shorter look. You could add wildflowers, native wildflowers, into the seed mix if you wanted to. Nice thing with this is we're looking at an approximate cost of $3,000 per acre. This is from this one firm. And that includes sort of them assessing the situation and doing a couple years of maintenance. There may need to be some spot treatment with herbicide to keep out weeds at the beginning. But if you think back about the $1,500 a month for the dogs over 10 years, that worked out to something like $175,000, and it's just sort of a control method. It's not changing the habitat that attracts the geese in the first place.
Can I interrupt with a question
Sure.
about that? So that would be for all of the fields, not just the edge of the water?
That would be something that we would want to get an expert involved to assess that. I mean, it would seem to me that you would want sort of a buffer around the pond with this grass. Wherever there is grass now, you would replace whatever, Kentucky bluegrass or whatever we have there with this type of grass. That would keep them away from there. Then maybe they're moving off into sort of the sledding hill or some other areas of the park, but they, presumably would not, since there wouldn't be a food source right next to the pond, they would not tend to hang out there. But again, we'd want to, we would recommend that the township would engage a consultant that, could assess the situation, has the experience. So just, real quick summary, yes, there are some negative environmental effects. I guess my personal view is it seems to be, it's more of sort of a nuisance issue, and having been there, and you got to watch where you step, every step you take. I've never really had issues with the geese coming at me, but it's, there is that, but then certainly I'm concerned about the water quality impacts as well. But again, our advice would be that the township look at engaging an expert to, study this site and maybe other sites if they're looking for that, to get some professional advice on the situation. So can take any questions you may have.
Just a quick, so the geese, they don't like tall grass. Why would we not just let the grass grow tall? The existing grass, let it grow, don't cut the grass, just let it grow.
Yeah, it is
Because
an
there's
option.
no, virtually, not only is there no cost, but we save money because we're not mowing the grass there anymore.
Right. There still will be, every spring there will be new grass shoots coming up, and that's what they're there to eat. It would be a deterrent. Could be something that we try for a year or two and see how that goes.
I think that's the main recommendation, is that from a habitat modification standpoint, there's a whole bullet list of things that we could look at, and that's something that the board should absolutely consider, is habitat modification, because that's the easiest way to prevent them from showing up in the first place.
So, in my opinion, if not cutting the grass is an option, there's absolutely no cost in trying it. If we tried it for one season and it didn't work, then we should try something else. But in essence, everything I hear in terms of repairing buffers and whatnot, the best thing to do is just a no-mow. Make it a large no-mow zone. Granted, there may be a small area we can mow for access to the pond, where the picnic tables are, kind of where that little parking lot is. But in my mind, I appreciate everything you did, because it kind of helps us make a really easier decision, at least in my opinion. It's easier for me to make a decision.
It's a good experience to go through.
Yeah, one thing I would note is in my conversations with the township staff is I believe it was tried one year, and there was pushback from the residents that, there's a perception that, hey, we're not taking care of our parks. Myself, I love that sort of shaggy look, that wild look, but, we are talking sort of this classic historic estate that probably, through all its history was a nice mown, manicured lawn. And now
Well,
you're looking to have sort of an overgrown look, if you will, and there's that.
Well,
there's
it's
that
also
issue.
sending mixed messages, because we also, from another board, have the advice, don't go recreate in tall grasses in the summer because of ticks. So if you're growing the grass long there, you have the conflicting message to our residents. So I would be interested to hear what our Parks and Rec Board thinks about the tall grasses in some areas. I mean, it's possible that we could have tall grasses in the areas that are most attractive to the geese, but not as useful to the people, so that there wasn't that conflict.
Right, and you might also cut swaths, sort
Right.
of, circuitous trails through the tall grass so that there's a clear way to move through them where you're not walking through tall
Right.
grass.
Is there any other commissioner comment or
Well,
questions?
up until this past year, there was a lot of vegetation around the pond. And then you remember we clear cut that because it was totally out of control. We still had a lot of geese, even though we had that. And the same thing at Fenimore. Intentionally we allowed, not just for riparian purposes, but also for goose control. And didn't seem to be very successful. We had also tried some of the monofilament. You put stakes in and monofilament about 6 to 8 inches off the ground. The geese can't see it, but they run into it, and they just like, what's going on? That wasn't very successful either.
I think it's really important. We spend through the summer up until through October That's a very short period of time. So I think it's tough to make any conclusion, really. I mean, it's always been kind of hit and miss of, let's focus on this, try and come to some sort of a conclusion. You know, these are our findings after, you know, talking with the folks up there on the screen.
It's all good information.
I'd also like to just reinforce what Dan said earlier, that it's going to need to be a multifaceted approach. And you say, oh, well, we tried this and it failed, and then we tried this and then it failed. I think really what's the solution is going to look like is we tried this, and this all at the same time, and we gave it 3 years to see if it worked, kind of thing. I think that's kind of what the solution is going to look like.
Yeah.
Right, even if we change the habitat, maybe you still need to bring the dogs in to kind of keep them a little on edge about the place. And then when they sort of put together, well, there's no food here, and these dogs keep showing up, you know, maybe that's what gets them to move on.
Well, this is great information. We really appreciate the work you've done.
And also, the Board of Health in our packet was a letter from the Board of Health. They had looked into this from the health aspect and could not recommend any actions based on negative health impacts. Again, it came down to the convenience and the appearance and things of that nature.
Yeah, they found it's not a public health problem. Well, first of all, thank you for coming and doing all this research. It was December of 2012 that I took my 2 grandsons to the Willows, and it was a very, very unpleasant experience. And out of that came at least my desire to have this problem addressed. And we had our police department study it, and that goes back just about 9 or 10 months. It was excellent presentation, as yours has been. So let me just summarize. If we planted new grasses that are inedible or unappetizing to the geese, that's a partial solution. I assume that's expense, and there's maintenance cost as well to it.
The only thing I would say there, that if you were to go with one of these sort of, well, they're not native here, but it's like a natural grass instead of a lawn grass, you know, you would go from mowing, I don't know, maybe we're mowing 20, 30 times over the summer, versus you could mow it once a year if the township was okay with the grass being 6 to 7 inches high. So,
and in the winter time, though, that grass, like lawn grass, goes down, and the geese then move back in. Am I right?
It's not palatable.
There's not a food source.
They're not interested in eating.
Okay, so that grass, it would displace the other grasses that they would feed on.
Yeah, you would probably have to actually physically kill the other grass.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. There's some money involved there. Dogs are a possibility, but it's temporary and expensive, and you just chase the geese upstream.
Forever, yeah.
Don't cut the grass, as Commissioner Fisher said. All right, let's get down to the issue here. Oh, addling. I forgot about addling. Addling is great, but it's labor intensive, and it doesn't take care of the adults. The adults find
It's really a population control method.
It was part of the Goose Guys contract, was to also addle the eggs.
Goose Guys were doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's get down to the issue here, and that is culling. Dan, I appreciate your point about it would be inhumane, I think you said, or words to that effect, to have this lovely habitat for geese and then to have a program of slaughtering. But I must say, I think we're more important than the geese. The geese have no natural predators any longer. I guess the mountain lions, pumas, whatever they were, are long gone from this area. And we have a deer culling program here. We had some opposition to it in mid-2012. I respect those people. They're honestly motivated people. But did you find in any of your research that these geese are under legal protection status?
No, that was actually a turning point for me personally, was one of the first things you learned is that these geese are actually labeled an invasive species in the Commonwealth. So it's like, all right, now you look at them as bad guys almost.
Okay.
But culling is very similar, and I would say based on the research we did, to the Goose Guys. You can come in and cull a flock, but there's nothing preventing them from a new flock coming in. It's still an attractive.
Yes, but eventually, you start with this mass and you narrow it down. And similarly, any of the other solutions you mentioned, any of the other solutions, have the same result. They're temporary. It's a cycle. They'll come back. and so forth. So,
Culling's no different. There's nothing there to say culling's going to prevent the geese from coming back.
well, wait a minute now.
They're like the blob. They're going to come from neighboring townships who are not culling.
Okay.
They're just going to fill a void if it's an attractive void.
Well,
to
what
them.
you're describing is an insoluble problem.
No,
And
I think, Jim, what we're emphasizing is that we think we should make it unattractive to geese. Make the willows so it's not inviting. They will fly over it, or they will stop and leave.
That's
But
the permanent.
it's not just the Willows, it's Warren Philippone Park, it's Odoriccio, it's Eastern College, where they have a lovely pond.
We
I mean-
haven't even spoken about the high school. The high
Yeah,
school's
and
covered in goose.
so I want my fellow board members to be thinking about this. We've had a very successful deer culling program. We're now in our second year of it. And I think we ought to be seriously thinking about culling. And I won't take as an answer, sorry, guys, that they're just going to, their cousins from upstream or next county over are going to come and replace them. So what? We just keep at it, just with the deer. The deer are going to be replaced too, and we're just going to keep at that.
There's a difference in the mobility of the animals, though, correct? The geese are much more mobile, meaning if you create an attractive void, you're much more likely to have that void filled than with a deer population.
Within hours.
Yes.
Like they fly over, yeah.
So it's like the geese are a reservoir. It's a reservoir of geese, and it's almost endless. And if you make one little change, you run the risk of investing a lot of money in one area and having no positive impact. The point I'm making is I think it's distinctly different than the deer culling program, which can see benefit from culling. I'd be surprised if we could see the same benefit from culling these animals.
I think one of the things we're missing, and for what it's worth, a deer crossed my residence street today. So, the deer are going to be there, the geese are going to be there. What we're missing isn't, I think, this is my opinion, an expectation. Like, what is the expectation we're trying to meet? Do we not want to see any geese? Do we want to see 10 geese? How much poop on the ground is acceptable? That's what we're missing, and so we're taking shots in the dark here.
Well,
about
I'll tell you,
what
I was at
works.
Philadelphia Sports Club last week, about 5 in the afternoon. I looked up the noise. There must have been 150 geese flying over. I could exaggerate and say 300, but no, I did a quick count, about 150 geese. And I'd like to see maybe 5 geese, to answer your point.
I think that would help us a lot. If we can, I don't know, I think we need an
What I'm hearing you gentlemen say is there is no one answer. We have to come up with a multifaceted approach, and we have to stick with it.
And there's-
That could include culling, definitely grass, stream bed, dogs. I mean,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be nice to have a permanent dog there all the time?
Yeah, and the different methods are going to work for different areas, right? So we're not going to be able to do habitat modification on the sports fields.
Yes,
So to attack the sports fields problem, that's going to be a different solution.
yes.
We don't have the answer to the sports fields problem. There's no easy one there. Maybe it's dogs,
No, Chief's going to put the 2 canines over there, right?
Well, I feel like I just have to weigh in that it would take a very, very, very large amount of convincing to get me to agree to a culling program for geese. I did it very reluctantly with the deer because, in my view, the deer issue was a direct threat to safety of our residents, with 113 car accidents caused by deer a year. We haven't seen any evidence from our Board of Health or from the EAC that our lives are at risk because of these geese. They're not. And so I think, in my book, culling is off the table here. But I have heard some promising other avenues of address that we could try. And I think we should, maybe with some consulting help, get a menu of options that we can work together and try them out for 3 years, or give them a really solid try. But again, I think we should, before we do that, or working with the consultant, we should have our Parks and Rec Board really a part of this, because they're the ones who know how these parks are being used and where we're going to get pushback from residents.
Madam President, if I may, maybe just some history. The goose guys you talked to, I was the one that stopped it in 2010. 30 days into the job here, my observations was that it was a farce, an extreme waste of taxpayers' dollars to what was being done. And to spend $12,000 a year to have a dog, and I saw him fly across the street, and then fly right back after they left. They have a real tough time with that. I think with what the Board of Health has come up with, the police department's put a program together that you've heard. I know Steve has worked on options. There must be a difference between Ohio and Pennsylvania, because in Ohio, when you put swans in, the geese are gone for good. But apparently, like here, they must be different breeds or that, because I know that was one of the recommendations I made. Actually, we had prices on that. I would ask the board that really in the way of priorities of all the things that we have to work on as a township, I would ask that you don't send this on to any more boards. Just make a decision. If these are the recommendations we have, staff can go ahead and do this. We can come back within a year, but to continue to, we've talked a year already on this. The other option is too, as I spoke with the people at the Hartford Dog Park, if you allowed some of the dogs to go down there and they would frequent down there, you're going to have a natural, and that there's no cost to that for us to be able to do that. But I think to keep going on with this, I think for what the work that they've done here, we can take these items, work with Steve and his staff, and look to implement some of these, and then come back to the board and the EAC. We can work right with you if you're okay with that with Public Works. And then after 12 months, we'll come back to this board next year and let you know this is what we've come up with. If that's agreeable with the EAC, we'll work right with Steve and his staff, and we'll put some of these things into place and see what we can do, because I think you've done some great work on this.
I think that's a great idea. I'd love to see a plan put together by our staff. But again, some of these suggestions would significantly change the use of our parks. So I don't think that's something we can just, I think we need some input from the people who use our parks.
Can I just summarize what I would be supporting? First of all, I like the idea of changing expectations. So we're hearing that this would change the way we view and use our parks.
Low expectations, you're always happy.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm the problem, not the geese.
No.
No.
Well, maybe.
Thanks.
Maybe. Well, so I would support swans, allowing dogs in some parks that we don't currently allow dogs, and certainly having riparian buffers of at least 150 feet. The Riverkeeper has given us a document tonight. They're recommending a minimum 100-foot. If it's our own ponds and streams, do 150 feet. One of the biggest issues operationally this township faces is the amount of money we spend on cutting grass. I forget the total number of acreage that we cut now, but it was in the hundreds of acres that we cut now. Steve, you just give me a quick number. How many hundred?
I apologize for not having my fast facts, but it is a few hundred acres.
A few hundred acres of cutting grass every week, or most weeks. And we've had this issue at Clemacrone Park where we're cutting the grass up to the stream. And I've had community members ask me over and over and over again, please stop cutting the grass up to the stream. We put stakes in. But the Public Works crew, they're trying to do a good job. They're trying to make things look really pretty for us. But they don't realize that in some ways they're doing too much work, right? So what I think this board needs to do is say, you know what, we're okay. We're not going to make all the parks look like unkempt places. But let's put some common sense to this. Let's not spend a lot of money on remedies. Let's not cut the grass so often. And especially around the ponds, let's get a 150-foot buffer. And to Jim's point, if we want to have a place to walk through there, I've never been able to walk around that pond. I've been here 27 years, never once. I went one time and I ruined a pair of shoes, Willows. Never went back to walk around that pond. One time was enough. But if there was a riparian buffer and then maybe we want to put a little meandering trail through there with gravel, the geese may end up on it, but if you make it small enough, a small trail, that's fixed. So again, swans, good idea in the pond. Allow dogs in as many parks as we can. Maybe there's some limits of when and where, but if we can make it uncomfortable for the geese. I'm not going to be in favor of trying to kill all the geese in Pennsylvania, because that's what we would need to do to address this issue. And Jim, I don't mean to take a shot at you, but the fact is the migratory pattern of geese is probably near 1,000 miles. So, do we have to kill geese with 100 square miles?
These are non-migratory.
Well, these are,
They live here.
but we get rid of them, and then new ones fill the void, and they become home.
More
They make
and more
Radnor
geese,
home.
I mean, at least from the basic research we've done, more and more geese are becoming resident geese, and there's less migratory geese.
Okay, so maybe if we make it.
I don't know if I should say less, but.
So if we implement some of these changes, we make it not so cozy for them here, new ones won't fill the void.
But
Okay.
for the record, swans are not, and with all due respect, They're not a recommendation of ours.
Okay.
They're more of an invasive
Well-
species based on our research.
It's wintertime now, so in the next 2 or 3 months, why don't you work with Public Works and come back to us with the recommendations?
Actually, if I could add one thing, as part of the riparian buffer that we're reestablishing, one of the items that we wanted to do was to look, I actually met with the flight turf people, because one of the problems with the old, for lack of a better term, buffer that was there, it was all overgrown. So part of our plan was, aside from the plantings, was to install the flight turf so the mowers stay out, but the grass only grows about 6 inches. And we're going to make that part of a grant application. So that may be a way of testing, and we could work with the various groups. But that was along all the areas where we planted the 78 trees. So if we go with that, we might get an idea of how the geese react to that. So if you see that there's geese in the park, but they never touch anything within the riparian buffer, you know, that's a start. And then along with the different other methods we spoke of.
Thank you, Steve. All right, we need to move along, but I think that we've all come to the consensus that the EAC will work with our staff and come up with a menu of items, and we'll look to start them this spring. Okay? Thank you so much for all of your work. We really appreciate it. All right, moving along, we have our consent agenda next. These are items that are perfunctory in nature and don't ordinarily require any debate or discussion. But we give an opportunity for commissioners or the public to remove an item if anyone feels that something should be discussed. So is there any commissioner who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Is there any member of the public who would like to do so? All right, can I have a motion to pass the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
As stated.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes 7-0. Next, we have our committee reports, and we will begin with Personnel and Administration with Commissioner Fisher.
Give me a moment to get to that item. Okay, first up, I'll move Resolution 2014-07. This is setting the zoning hearing board member terms. And I believe there was a new copy, and it has gotten swallowed up. Anybody have the new copy of that?
I don't have the copy, but the only changes were number 1 was changed to
Yeah.
William and Martin. Okay.
Right.
And number 4 is John
Well, we had a name
Riley.
wrong, yeah. So this will be setting the term, William Martin, his term will be January 6th, 2014 through December 31st, 2016, a 3-year term. And then we have George Nagel, January 6th, 2014 through December 31st, 2017. That's a 4-year term. And John Riley, correct me if I'm wrong on this. He's the alternate?
John Riley would be the alternate, Brad DeLizia would be a 5-year term.
Okay, I'm sorry, thank you. Brad DeLizio, January 6, 2014 through December 31st, 2018, 5-year term, and then the alternate is Brad DeLizio.
John Riley would be the
John Riley,
alternate for a 3-year term.
Yeah, so 1 and 4 were swapped, but we had, the fourth one said George Martin, and there is no George Martin, so.
Yeah,
It's okay.
Not sure
And
how
I
I
lost
got
the copy
George
that you
Martin,
gave me,
but-
so I apologize. Is that clear now or not?
It's clear. Did you move to approve?
Sorry?
Did you move to approve?
I did move.
Okay, is there a second? Is there any commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Okay, I'll move Resolution 2014-01 and ask up the presenters from the Greater Philadelphia Regional Trail Network.
We have John Fisher here tonight to speak on behalf of that group. Hello, John.
Good evening. Let me see if I get my PowerPoint. All right, how does this work? There it goes. How do I make it full screen? Okay, good enough. Okay, good. Good evening, I'm John Fisher. I'm here tonight to ask you to adopt the resolution before you in support of the circuit. I would guess that most of you have never heard of the circuit. The circuit is the first regional approach to the development of multi-use trails in the greater Philadelphia area. This slide will show you some of the current members of the circuit. The circuit was founded approximately 2 years ago by the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, and the Bicycle Coalition. The goal of the circuit is to develop 750 acres of multi-use trails in the greater Philadelphia area. To date, 250 miles of trails are in place. 50 miles of trails are under construction, leaving 450 miles to go, including the trail that connects the Radnor Trail, which is up there in the corner of Delaware County, all by itself, to the John Heinz Park in greater Philadelphia. Right now, 25% of the population of the 8 counties affected by the greater Philadelphia Trail movement live within a mile of the trail, of any circuit trail. When the 750 miles of trails have been constructed, this number will jump to 50%. Trails are a tremendous plus to a community. The Radnor Trail is an example of the benefit in the lower right corner of this graphic. As I think most of you know, the Philadelphia Economy League study 2 years ago found that properties located within a quarter of a mile of the Radnor Trail increased in value by an average of $69,000 solely because of their proximity to the trail. The purpose of the resolution before you tonight is twofold. First, to indicate that Radnor Township supports the goals of the coalition in developing a comprehensive integrated trail system in the greater Philadelphia area. Second, to urge the DVRPC county commissioners to adopt a dedicated source of financing. 3 years ago, the William Penn Foundation granted $10 million for the planning and development of trails. The project that you just approved received $45,000 from that William Penn money. Unfortunately, the William Penn money has all been spent, so we need to find new sources of money. So by adopting this resolution tonight, you are sending a message to the DVRPC commissioners that Radnor Township thinks the development of a regional trail system is worth the expenditure of some of the dedicated transportation dollars that might be available to us. I'll answer any questions. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. All right, do we have any commissioner questions or comments? All right, any staff comments or questions? Any public comment? All those in favor of passing the resolution?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I'll move Resolution 2014-02. This is authorization to enter into a contract with Amanda Holt for the redistricting recommendation in Radnor Township. Is Amanda Holt here? No. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Would you like to come up and...
I don't think she has a presentation.
No, not prepared to. Okay.
I'll just give a little background on this. According to our home rule charter, we are far overdue for our redistricting. And we are going to go ahead, if we pass this tonight, and contract with Amanda Holt to come up with a first draft or a recommendation for how we might do that redistricting given our population changes in Radnor. Ms. Holt is somewhat of a very well known in the redistricting circles because she was involved in challenging the state redistricting plan successfully and drafted her own version of a plan which the state Supreme Court found very convincing, and they sent the proposed plan back to the drawing board when it came to redistricting Pennsylvania. She's a mathematician, an amateur cartographer, and has a very sterling reputation, and I, for one, am looking forward to seeing her work taking the boundaries of Radnor and seeing what mathematically makes the most sense. Are there any questions or comments?
When you say taking the boundaries and seeing what makes the most sense, what do you mean? What exactly is he doing? And I apologize for not knowing about
Redrawing
this.
our districts according, with our constitutional parameters. What is it? Contiguous, equal populations, and without dividing political subdivisions. Whatever the Constitution sets out the parameters. So, and the product we would get would be a recommendation, and then we would have obviously a period of public comment where anybody and everybody and all the political parties and the league, and we would ask for comment on what was presented to us.
And we have just one quirky thing in Radnor where a little section of one legislative district's in one ward due to reapportionment. They have to have a separate machine. We should try and eliminate that and get them all in the same legislative district.
So
this is going to set in each ward the exact same number of voters?
I don't think it's exact, but that is the goal.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
No,
It should be exact population.
It's not voters, it's population.
Well, there's two standards. You have what's in your charter, which is, I think, what Elaine was referring to. It's been in your charter, but it was revised recently when the charter was revised. But this has been in your charter. It's at section 203, and it'll basically redistrict the 7 electoral districts. And there's some general standards dealing with it should be as equal as possible in population, but I think there's some mathematical variations that the courts have identified, 7-8%, something like that. It should be compact and contiguous, so you don't have a sort of a long, narrow district, and then it should follow existing governmental, natural, geographic, or major man-made. This is in your charter, man-made boundaries and barriers and boundary lines running down the middle of the street. So this is a little different than what the state rules are, but it's generally consistent. And there's a Municipal Reapportionment Act, which has been on the book since '96, which also requires you to do this after each census, every 10 years. So it hasn't been done, I don't think, ever.
No, last time we did it was in '93.
Was it '93, Bill?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And then we did one for after the 2000 census, but we never passed it.
So we're sadly overdue.
Yeah, they're the requirements, and it is a mathematical drawing of lines to some extent, and it'll probably move some properties out of certain wards and into other wards, depending on the population. But it doesn't have to be exactly identical in terms of population. I think I'll leave it up to the expert that's sitting here. I think it's 7 or 8% is 10%. You can have a 10% variation in the numbers.
Okay, is there any other commissioner comment or questions?
Well, Mr. Spengler, if you could, what was the reason why it wasn't done in 2003? Do you remember? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I liked it the way it was. I didn't want to change it. Nobody wanted to change it, so we didn't do it.
Okay, so it's not necessary that we
Yeah.
change it.
Well, it is, because my ward's the largest ward. You have how many voters? 1,900? And I got 3,300.
I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Well, no,
what's the history on
difference.
this?
No, we should have done it in 2000, and we just didn't have the will to do it. And nobody pushed it after we looked at the figures and they saw it was changed. Everybody said, let's just leave it the way it was. We shouldn't have done that. We should have done something, and we didn't do it. According to the law, we violated the law and didn't do it. And then the census for 2010, we haven't done it. So it needs to be done
Right.
legally.
It's called for in our charter. We all just took the oath to follow our charter, and we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, is there any other commissioner comment or questions? Any staff comment or questions? Any public comment?
Hi, Susan Stern, Newtown Square. I actually have a question, if you could ask the consultant. And I'm not remembering the term exactly, but I think she will. There's a theory in redistricting called shortest straight line theorem, straightest short line theorem. Do you know the term I'm talking about? My son knows it, I just tried to text him. Anyway, maybe I'll email you later about it. But there is a very scientific redistricting mathematical formula that is being talked about, that I was just curious if she was going to utilize that theorem, but
Well, when you get home and find it,
Yeah, I'm gonna
go ahead
text
and
Kevin
email
now.
it in, and our staff will make sure that she
It's
gets
probably
it.
for congressional districts. The words are pretty simple.
yes, it is for congressional districts. I'd be curious to see how it works as a matter of exercise. If it's supposed to be the fairest way to split a district, yes, mathematically. Thank you.
Sounds interesting. Any other public comment? All right, I'll go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes 6-0 with one abstention from Commissioner Booker.
Nothing further under Personnel Administration.
All right, I'd like to move the approval of ordinance 2013-17 for adoption.
I'll
Is there a
second that.
Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment? Any public comment?
Wait, actually, I just want to make sure that everyone knows. This is the ordinance that caused quite a ruckus in my neighborhood. We did strip out all of the parking restrictions pertaining to parking on one side of the street, so none of that is in this ordinance.
Okay, any public comment? I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it is adopted. The ordinance is adopted by a vote of 7-0.
That's it under public safety.
Before we leave public safety, I would just like to make an announcement and maybe have someone elaborate in case I leave out anything. But there will be a fundraiser this weekend, Saturday night, I believe, at the Flippin' Bailey's in Garrett Hill from 4 to 7. And it's a fundraiser for our K-9 fundraising effort for our K-9 units. And I believe it's $25 a head. So you can pay at the door, I believe, or you can come in and get tickets ahead of time, or just send in a donation to the K-9 group. Anything else on that?
Just one thing, Madam President, there's going to be a silent auction there also.
Oh, great. Okay. So I hope to see you all there. All right, on to community development with Commissioner Curley.
First item is to set a hearing date. So I'm going to let Mr. Nagel, you have some ideas on this, John, correct, that you want to share with us?
Okay, before we begin, I'm going to just formally recuse myself from this discussion. As I have stated on many prior occasions, I have a conflict in that my husband sells a small amount of inventory to Villanova, and I believe Jim Higgins is going to preside as vice president.
So can we have Mr. Nagel, he has some ideas that I think we'd be interested in hearing, and then hear from the applicant. Is that reasonable?
Well, I think
Let John Nagel go ahead.
John can go ahead, because John and I have a lot of similar ideas.
My recommendation tonight, and I'll make a motion to this effect, is that we adopt, we revise the CICD to incorporate many of the Planning Commission comments, not all, though. And that's what I've just passed out to my fellow commissioners. But before I move any further with this, there's a very important question I need to ask John Rice. John, if we do make changes tonight, what the implications?
Well, whatever comes out of tonight, if you're ready to, if you can agree on a ordinance, you can set a hearing date for February, as long as it's 30 days out, and because it still has to go back to the two planning commissions just to meet procedural requirements.
Right.
So we would be reintroducing the final edits from tonight,
Right,
right?
right.
And it's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you would have whatever, where it stands now with whatever additions you want to make to it tonight. You can set that hearing date as long as it's out, 30 days out from, say, tomorrow. That would give us sufficient time to advertise it under the MPC twice, and then it would come back to you with at least, I think your planning commission, I think your meeting in February is the 10th. So you'd have two planning commission meetings between tonight and the 10th that they would have an opportunity to look at it. If there were additional things you wanted to deal with the night of the hearing, you would have to deal with it then. But you could move it on tonight with whatever changes you want to make to it.
Okay, thank you. Well, specifically, I'd like to go over the items where I didn't agree with the Planning Commission. And first, I want to thank the Planning Commission. They put a tremendous amount of effort into this. And I think I watched all those meetings, and I think Peter did a great job incorporating their comments in the rev he gave us. The first thing that I do not agree with and would not recommend that we incorporate are the setback changes. They're on under dimensional regulations A through D. I do not agree with the inclusion of the new E, which is the intersection setbacks. I really think that's not necessary. And it also does smell mightily like spot zoning. There were, in F, I would like to revise that to say, all types of facilities shall be set back 100 feet from the boundary of any lot used for single-family residential purposes. G2, I think that should not be deleted. This is the one about the elevator and stair towers. I do not agree with the inclusion, with the deletion in 4 under E, or G, the new G. I support the change from must to shall that Peter caught. Individual building coverage was acceptable to me. On a maximum impervious surface, I thank Maya for the information she provided to us. However, I think what we really should be doing is modifying our stormwater ordinances and to reflect the changes that she recommended, not the CICD. I do not agree with the inclusion of I2 because our stormwater ordinance should be the controlling document. It should not be anything special for CICD, in my opinion. Riparian buffer planning strip. There was a deletion of unless waived by the Board of Commissioners. I don't agree with that. I think that exactly how we do business, we allow for waivers and then we evaluate those in a public meeting with public comments. C2, I'm fine with. C3, I want to change that slightly. In the added text, I would like to delete or required setbacks and then add or areas, and then it goes on to say that are already preserved or protected, period, and delete or otherwise undevelopable. The one I just handed you out, I just finished
7.
up on 7.
It's on 7.
Then there's, I'm on to page 9. I have no difficulties with that. That makes a lot of sense. Mechanical equipment. Page 10, which is conditional use number 1. That's an okay change. I really don't see the need for K. It seems redundant. We currently have something in our zoning about that. Unless there's a real number. What Peter's comment was is there was no number given. And that's it. So I move the introduction, or move the revision of this ordinance as I just indicated.
Is there a second?
I'll second that,
Okay.
but I'll also
I
be
wonder
making a motion at some point.
I'm looking for some help here on the structure of proceeding. Tonight, strictly speaking, our only purpose is to set a hearing date under the municipality's planning code, which, as John Rice said, has to be a minimum of 30 days out. But I think it will be helpful to have discussion of the document I'm glad that John Nagel has used the Planning Commission document. I hope that will mollify some of the criticism or some of the objections that members of the township public have had about us not having the right document. Everybody will be afforded a chance to speak tonight. I would ask you to be brief. We have a 5-minute rule. I would ask you not to take your full 5 minutes. We still have a long agenda to go tonight. Don't repeat things that other people have said. Our board has received a lot of written information from members of the public in the last 24, 48 hours. I've read it all, and I'm sure the other commissioners have read it. So we're up to speed on on people's opinions. Again, we're going to use the Planning Commission draft. We've also already had it introduced now. Mr. Nagel's motion was seconded. I'm looking for guidance here. Does the board feel that we should have the applicant come to the rostrum to state a position on the various
Yes.
issues that John Nagel has mentioned?
Yes, that's my position.
Do we, so I agree with everything you said. The only thing is, it's not clear to me, I'd like to make some motions to put back in some of the things that John has taken out, just so they're on the table.
Okay, I think
Yeah.
that would be in order.
Fair enough, but just John didn't take anything out. All he did was add, correct? I mean, what is before us?
He took out the setbacks.
No, what is before, we have never had the Planning Commission document introduced. So nothing has been introduced, so it isn't like, it isn't like John is detracting from a document that we already identified, correct?
I'm sorry. John has removed recommendations from the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter whether it was introduced. We've already agreed, I think, tonight, that the document that this board introduced a month ago is no longer on the table.
We didn't agree to that. Yes.
Well,
that's not, so that.
Well, let's put it to a vote then.
Yes,
I mean,
that's my understanding. What we have to do tonight is we have to decide, it's multiple choice. We have to decide if we want the document that is ready to go that we can.
Well, do you want a motion for that document?
I want to hear about John's.
Okay.
And I want to hear yours too.
Yeah.
And then I want to hear from the applicant.
So what I want to do, I'll just make my motion. I'd like to, my motion is to introduce the, I'll call it the Radnor Township Planning Commission recommended ordinance that was, I'll say, authored by Peter Nelson. So that document was provided to this board. I believe now it's on the table in the back. I'd like to move to introduce that document.
Is there a second? John, I assume that would be in contrast with the Nagel motion, which
That's
is
right.
to use the Planning Commission document without certain elements that ask for changes and setbacks.
Well, so I'm already confused.
Right, well, no, I think you're right. I would say, John, I agree with John offering the Planning Commission document.
Which John?
John Fisher, okay? So I would second John's motion to offer this document, and then I think we have to consider that and then talk about John Nagel's changes to the offered document.
All right.
John Fisher's was basically an amendment to the motion put forward by Mr. Nagel.
Yes.
To take in whole everything that came out of the Planning Commission.
Right.
John Nagel's motion was based on something less than that, did not include the setbacks, the change setbacks and some other
All right, well, you can,
items.
either way you take a look, that's the concept.
Right. If we go with the Fisher motion.
It's been seconded at this
I know.
point, yeah.
His document. Well, let me restate. If we go with John Nagel's document, I wonder whether we will be foreclosing the opportunity of people to comment on the taking out of the setback changes that the Planning Commission
We're
is
not voting
recommending.
until all the comments are done, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
As long as we let, just, we'll have to make that clear that because of the complexity of this, we may wait to vote until all the comments are done first, meaning we won't necessarily allow comments before we vote later in this proceeding.
It just, gentlemen, it just seems to me that based on what we have here, it's better to first consider everything that the Planning Commission proposed and then to consider stripping some of it out, as John Nagel has requested. That seems to be more logical to me. But, I mean, that I think is going to be easier procedurally.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just a brief suggestion, just to clarify, because I know I'm lost a little bit too, but maybe as a motion to remove currently from the agenda, remove the current one that sits on the agenda now from further consideration. Make a motion to that.
No, we're still considering that. We might go.
Okay, so you have three options, okay.
Yes. We have to leave the
John
thread
Nagel,
on the table.
Would you be comfortable with using the John Fisher document which has all the Planning Commission changes for the purpose of discussion and moving things forward?
Absolutely.
All right.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
and then your amendments would be to take out the pieces.
All right.
Because I think that
So,
would read more
there's a
clearly.
Well, I
motion-
also had some edits, too.
There's a motion, and it's been seconded to use the document as proposed by John Fisher, which is all of the Planning Commission.
Can I make a point of order,
We're not
Jim?
voting on anything. We're just having discussion.
Would it not be more prudent, since we have three distinct concepts? We have the concept that John Nagel has identified, the concept that John Fisher has identified, and the existing document, and to just have a discussion about which of those three is our best choice, and start with what John Fisher identified as his choice, since it is most inclusive.
All right, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so I'd like to make comment.
Public comment.
We're going to do public comment first?
No,
or-
you comment first.
Well, wait a minute. We have an applicant here that's,
Yeah, but John's going to make his position.
I just want to make my
and the applicant's
position,
speaking, the
and
public
then
all right.
and I'll try to do it quickly. I just want to comment, I've been receiving a large number of emails, calls, even visits to my home from residents in my ward, Bill Spingler's ward, and Elaine Schaefer's ward. Okay, so, and I don't know what type of feedback the other commissioners are getting. I haven't discussed that with them. So I just want to stress that I have many residents whose backyards abut this development at Villanova. So this zoning code will have a direct impact on their quality of life. The residents in the three wards that I mentioned traverse this area on a normal basis, meaning they drive past the university probably daily. So this, if you're living in Western Wayne, you're probably less likely to traverse the university than you are if you live in my neighborhood. It's that simple. Don't want to get into splitting hairs. Peter Nelson has prepared a memo, and I've gone through his memo, and out of a total of 14 paragraphs, he generally opined on whether or not the changes would have an effect or not have an effect on Villanova's proposal. What he did not do is opine on whether or not it would have an effect on the residents. I respect his point of view. It's helpful.
Just for the record,
Yes.
Peter is the solicitor to the Planning Commission.
That's right. So
and he
he's-
works in the same law firm as our solicitor, John Rose.
Yes, and his memo is representative, as far as I know, of the Planning Commission's opinions that they acted upon. So in reading his memo, I simply tallied how many he was in, he claimed that would have an effect or not have an effect, and there was a fairly large number that he opined that would not have much effect at all. But of the ones that he opined that would have an effect, one of them was the setbacks. So the setbacks, and then there were a couple where he claimed he wasn't certain. So I respect John Nagel's opinion that, that he would like to take that out. But I can assure you, as a resident, I've lived, near Villanova for about 27 years now. And now I live on a street that if you drive down to the end of the street, you will see Pike Field. And Pike Field is where the parking, just beyond Pike Field, is where the parking garage will end up. I also happen to know that a lot of residents that live in what we call Conestoga Village, If you drive through Conestoga Village now, you will see dormitories that appear to be in the backyards of the homes on that street. And they tower over the homes, and they're lit, and you can see dormitories when you're driving down these streets.
What street is that, John?
That's a good point. Barclayton? No.
Arlington, Brooklyn,
Which one?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, Fairfax, exactly. Sorry, I was going to pull a map up to get them all, but, so, and of course, when the stadium lights are on, and when there are activities at the university, you're hearing it, actually, in my opinion, there's like a sound skip. The sound is actually very loud in our neighborhoods. The lights are very bright in our neighborhoods. In fairness, the residents, we bought in these neighborhoods. Villanova was already there, but clearly Villanova is growing, and it has grown quite a bit in 27 or 28 years. So the reason I'm supporting all of the Planning Commission's points is that they spent a great amount of time hearing from the public, much more so than we have. And they have taken time, single-mindedly focused on this issue. This Board of Commissioners has heard thousands of topics in the last year. So while we have heard lots of comment, we've had to act on many other things this year, past year. So to that end, I do support the setbacks, and I'll tell you why. Right now, when there's an event at Villanova University, you have stacking the entire length of Lancaster Avenue from my development, where I live, all the way to the Blue Route. So stacking is defined as the cars that are stopped on the roadway that are either waiting for a traffic light to change or waiting for a police officer to wave the cars through. So we're talking, and I measured this as about a half a mile. And I think I did the calculation, it's anywhere between 200 and 500 cars. If you count both sides of the road, in some cases you have traffic stacking both sides of the roadway. So it doesn't take much imagination to realize that at some point in the next 20 years, Lancaster Avenue will need 2 turning lanes into what may become a parking garage on their site. Because to accommodate that many vehicles, you would need 2 turning lanes headed eastbound from the Blue Route. And it's a distance of 2,500 feet along that side of the road. So in order to accommodate those cars and get that stacking off the road to allow cars to traverse from Radnor into Lower Merion and vice versa, you would need to do that. If we don't increase the setbacks, what we will end up with is buildings very close to the cartway in the future. And I don't think that's good zoning. I don't think that's good planning. And I think in general, it doesn't allow for controlling the scale and the scope of this. The Planning Commission made it very clear that this setback was everything to do with future planning and also the scale of development. It doesn't, you don't need a degree in planning. You don't need to be an expert in planning to know that when you're driving down the road, if there's a tall building, it's much more palatable if it's equally set back from the road as its height. So if you have a 100-foot building, if it's 100 feet back from the roadway, you still see the sky. The closer that building comes to the roadway, you start to have a canyon effect. And what my neighbors and residents from 3 wards, people have come to me and said, resoundingly, we don't want to live in a canyon. We don't want to be driving past a university that's currently pretty much flat on both sides of the roadway to be towering above us and creating a canyon effect. So there are some reasons to do this setback that are pragmatic, meaning we're going to allow for this future widening of the roadway to accommodate the stacking.
So I understand, are you saying there's a possibility, you're not PennDOT, but you're thinking this, that there would be an extra lane added, or 2 lanes, 1 or 2 lanes, between Route 320 and the far eastern end of the campus?
I'm fairly certain that at some point, because the quality is, well, my point is the quality of service at those intersections during events is an F. And PennDOT was at one point willing to invest $2 or $3 million at putting an underpass for the students to walk under Lancaster Avenue. This is just 10, 15 years ago, they were going to invest $2 million to put an underpass to allow for the students to cross under the roadway. There wouldn't take much of imagination to think that they would want to widen this road. I'm not saying widen the road for through traffic. I'm saying widen the road to allow for right-hand turn stacking off the through lanes. Because right now, when those cars are trying to get into the parking lots, you have so much stacking that you have gridlock. There is no way to traverse from Lower Merion to the Blue Route, either direction. I took pictures of this. I've shared this with the board, shared it with the township. It is unimaginable. So if you live on the western side of the township, you may not even know this. You may come across it. You may live this once or twice a year. But if you live in my neighborhood, you live it for every event that's at the university. So I don't want to drone on. So to me, that's a really important point. And there was another, Commissioner Nagel had mentioned that he didn't agree with the setbacks at the corners. The Planning Commission talked about this quite a bit. And what their opinion was, when you have large events at Villanova, it doesn't take much imagination, or if you have seen it, to see the large crowds that assemble on the corners. You could have between 75 and 100 people waiting to cross the street during an event. And if you don't have the 100-foot corner for them to congregate on, you have a problem, because now they're spilling into the roadway. So these setbacks...
But that's the situation today, isn't it?
No, the situation today...
There's not 75 or 100?
Oh, no, the situation now is that you have lots of flat area, because there's no parking garage, there's no performing arts center, there's no buildings in that area. People can congregate within the parking lot area, so there's space.
So you're saying that the buildings will prevent that from happening?
In general, if the setbacks are not great enough, especially at the corners, you will not allow for this congregation. Not to mention the complexity of turn lanes that will end up being there, and the fact at some point that there will need to be an island of safety in the middle of the roadway, because PennDOT requires that whenever you add lanes, you will not expect pedestrians to cross more than 4 lanes without an island. So, again, they're state rules. I don't know what they're going to end up enforcing. There are my points, and I support all the rest of the recommendations by the Planning Commission.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that we have a need to discuss the setback issue. And so I'm going to ask the applicant if they would come forward and perhaps try to, well, not perhaps try, but address Commissioner Fisher's point about the possible extra lane impacts going forward 10 years from now or 20 years from now, what it would mean to the building configuration and the building location along Lancaster Avenue, and second of all, his point about the congregation of pedestrians at, I think he's referring to Ithan Avenue and Lancaster Avenue, and with permanent buildings at near that intersection, will the pedestrians then be at risk and not have a safe place to wait for the traffic signal across the street?
Jim, I'd actually like to have their feedback on all the Planning Commission comments.
My sense is what I'd like to hear is comments on what John Nagel proposed, what John Fisher is proposing, and the current proposal, which we voted on last time. So that's what I'd like to hear from them.
Thank you. Nick Cornelia representing Villanova University. Chris Kowalski is also here, as is Bob Morrow, to answer the board's questions. As to a couple of the items, there was mention that Villanova is growing. Granted, there's new buildings being built, but we've presented to this board many times that for the last 30 years, Villanova's student population has remained the same and actually has even decreased. The purpose of this plan, as we all know, is to bring the students onto campus, which, again, will obviously limit the amount of traffic during rush hours on the site. There is some concerns expressed by the board that there is stacking. Recall now those students are commuting to campus rather than actually living on campus. Also, at least in my experience, and John, I'm there a lot too, from events and living in the community for so long, most of the stacking that I've seen is either at rush hour or during sporting events. And, granted, there is some stacking of sporting events, but that stacking is going to occur today. It's going to occur in the future. It's the same type of thing. And perhaps there'd even be less stacking as a result of the students now living on campus instead of driving to campus for a sporting event. As to the people on in the intersections during game times, again, I'm practically at every game, and because I'm a fan, not because, for any other reason. And there's plenty of room. Normally, as you know, Villanova now has fences around those parking lots. So people can't really stand in the parking lots that much anyway. They do on occasion, right before game time, they may be maybe 10 feet into the parking lot, if that. But normally the Radnor police do an excellent job on moving the traffic through and crossing in that area.
Nick, excuse me, the fence, I believe the fences, Bob, were the fences removed on the south parking lot? But the hedges were removed, something was removed, okay. And at the corners, the fence does not round the corner. The fence ends prior to the corners. There's openings.
Yeah, there's an opening, yeah. Yeah, but there's still fence there. But as I said, it does, if it extends in the parking lot during the very peak times before game time, it's not, in my mind, it's not a significant amount, and it's very well controlled by the police. As to the canyon effect, remember, this is only one side of the street where these setbacks would take place. The CICD ordinance states that you cannot transverse either a major collector or an arterial with the CICD. And that's the change that was recently made by the township. Remember, the ordinance you're really looking at now is the township's ordinance, the staff's ordinance. It's not Villanova's ordinance. At one time, it was Villanova's ordinance, but then staff has since taken over the changes and modifications to the ordinance. So in this ordinance, it provides that any university can only have a CICD on one side of the street. You cannot transverse an arterial or a major collector as well. As to the setbacks, one, remember where the parking garage is, you basically have 500 to 600 feet to the eastern boundary of the university. As to the other area in the existing main parking lot, you have to cross the SEPTA tracks. Then you have another area, the Aldwin Triangle, that is owned by Villanova before you actually come to the neighbors on Aldwin Lane. So you're talking a couple hundred feet for that, which is actually more than what our current code. Our current code requires 200 feet from a property line. And the proposal here at Villanova, and the beauty of it, is that it is so far from the other neighbors, 600 feet from eastern neighbors, and a couple hundred feet, more than 200 feet from the Aldwin Triangle neighbors as well. As to the ordinance itself, and again referring to Villanova, and as to the setbacks, Radnor Township, as you're all aware, the Radnor Township zoning ordinance basically was adopted in the 1960s. There have been amendments to that ordinance because obviously it's somewhat outdated. There was an amendment in 2004 that actually permitted in the R6 zoning district, which is as you go down Lancaster Avenue, probably between like Shimoni and Aberdeen, there's an R6 area. And that's for heavy residential type use, for multifamily residential, which is kind of similar to what we're talking about here. And that front yard setback's only 30 feet. Also in the C2 district, as you move a little bit further down where the old Acme used to be and now there's some shops in there, that front yard setback is 15 feet. Where the Range Rover is, and a little bit beyond that as you head west. And then in the middle of Wayne, as we know, there is no setback from the roadway for the town center residential and town center mixed-use type developments. Looking at the ordinance, that obviously we feel very comfortable with the ordinance that the township had drafted. And we didn't agree with everything in that ordinance, but we understood where they were coming from, and we accepted the changes as the township staff had drafted. The Planning Commission, granted, worked very hard on the ordinance, and we appreciate their comments that they made, and some of the comments are acceptable and Villanova can live with. Some of the comments Villanova cannot live with, one of them being the setbacks that we discussed. I went through, as Mr. Nagel went through the ordinance, I checked what items that Villanova would be amenable to, And I believe all the items and all the recommendations that he suggested, Villanova would be amenable to, provided that they could be adopted this evening or introduced this evening so that we can move the process along. Certainly, as I said, we feel comfortable with the other ordinance as well, but the changes proposed by Mr. Nagel would be acceptable to the university. Any other questions, we're certainly free to respond to.
Any questions from commissioners? Mr. Fennell? Is there,
I'd actually like to say my thought, not to you, Nick, just before the public, so they can hear what I have to say. I'm in support of it. I anticipate supporting what Commissioner Nagel put forward tonight. That seems like the best compromise. John, I don't think there's a canyon effect. I think it's the opposite. I think it's a village effect. I think the setbacks are appropriate. I think we want to move the activity toward the street, not away from the street in general. So I think the setbacks, as Mr. Nagel has identified them, are going to do more to solve the issues that you want solved than the setbacks that the Planning Commission has identified. Your second point about the turning lanes, while I'm open to it, I just don't think that that's prudent to plan for something that PennDOT might do that is likely undesirable. So I'm not terribly moved by that. I just don't think that that's a valid reason to accept the Planning Commission recommendations here. And then on balance, I think that this is going to mitigate some of the negative things that we're hearing about what it's like to live next to a university. And on balance, I think it's going to make it better. So that's why I intend to support it tonight.
all right, no other commissioner comments? I'll invite members of the public to come forward and address the board.
Hi, I'm Patty Barker from the Garrett Hill Coalition. I sent all of you an email earlier today, which I will not read. But I would just like to point out that the public has not seen the document that you're talking about. So you're talking about how confused you are? Imagine how confused we are sitting out there and people who are watching at home.
So can I just point of order, if we did what John Nagel wanted to do, that essentially starts the whole thing all over again. So that's what tonight then we go back to zero and the public sees the document that no one else has seen.
With all due respect, I think the public deserves that.
Yes, but that's what essentially, correct, John, if we do what you're recommending, we are doing it, we are giving you that process to see it. We're starting over with a new document.
With all due respect, Don, you're not actually starting over. Okay, we have how many different versions now? 1025. We have Delaware County Planning Commission recommendations. We have the Friends to Preserve Radnor ordinance, draft ordinance that was in your packet tonight. Thank you very much for putting that in. How come Planning Commission's draft ordinance wasn't in there? They're your advisory board. You know, I just don't get it. I'm stupefied by this whole process. And I read all this stuff, and there's a lot of other people who read all this stuff. So you can imagine our consternation, as I said in my email to all of you today, that come to find out, this document is nowhere to be found. I do appreciate Peter Nelson's memo. I was at the Planning Commission meeting. I heard what they said, how they directed Peter. Some of the things that they directed Peter to do were not included. The Delaware Riverkeeper Network's draft, you know, their comments, they motioned to have him put those in. So we're not really going back to zero. What I understand would happen tonight is if John Fisher's motion is accepted or is voted on, that you would use Planning Commission's document as the draft ordinance. It would mean that it has to go back to planning and Delaware County Planning. According to what John Rice is saying, basically you're talking 30 days. It would go to Delco in 2 weeks. It would go to, I don't think it would get to planning tomorrow, but it would get there February 10th. Planning has already looked at it. I think it would be a pretty quick process. So at most, I would think you'd be talking 2 months, but I really think you're talking 30 days. And with all due respect for Villanova, and I do respect the university, I respect their right to develop, But we as the residents, I think John Fisher made a very good case for those of us who live in the 7th Ward. It's right there. It's right there. And Villanova, generally speaking, is a good neighbor. I do want to say that as well. So my point is the Planning Commission, you, the board, have been asking the Planning Commission for over a year to do what they finally did. They had multiple meetings, and they recommended revisions that are well considered, fair, and reasonable. John Fisher talked about the setbacks. Obviously, as a neighbor, I support those increased setbacks. I don't think they're onerous to Villanova. One of the coalition members, Phil R., will come up and speak to you at some point, if not tonight, when we go to hearing about setbacks and what we found out when we walked up and down and measured everything. And Nick talks about, C2 and R6. That's not Villanova. That's not the area that we're talking about. We're talking about a lovely area where things are set back. So I ask that you vote to introduce the Planning Commission's draft ordinance that was not available for the public to read, so that the public has an opportunity to read it. We deserve that as your constituents. You have pledged to protect our interests. Please do it.
When you say the Planning Commission ordinance was not available to the public,
It was not available.
Are you overlooking the fact that the Planning Commission issued that in the month of December?
Where was it? It's not on the website.
It was not included in our packets.
Not included in the packet, not in the
And it was
website.
n- I can't find it on the
We
website.
reached out to the Planning Commission to ask, could we see it?
No.
And
Have
come to
anybody from
find
the
out,
planning, Susan, are you still here? What happened to the ordinance that you considered at the Planning Commission? Where did it go?
So sorry, so the document that the Planning Commission reviewed in November, tabled, and then completed in December was the document that you have been looking at for months that was dated draft 10/25/2013.
Okay.
At that meeting, we gave a bunch of recommendations to Peter Nelson, who was going to incorporate those into a memo and then create a draft ordinance from that. We, as Planning Commission members, actually never received the subsequent draft ordinance.
So it happened after your meeting?
Correct.
Outside the
Yes,
meeting.
it was, those were the issues that we voted on at our December 3rd meeting. Peter took that information and crafted a memo that I believe is available on the website and is part of your packet tonight, but we never saw the resultant ordinance.
Well, we have it
document.
tonight. We're all looking at it tonight.
My understanding is just the 7 of you. It's not available on the
Is this
website.
ordinance on the back table?
No.
And why, Bob, John Rice, Kevin Kachansky, why is this draft sent to the Board of Commissioners and not available to the public at this point?
So
This is mind-boggling.
Yes, it's not mind-boggling. This board voted to send a draft to the Planning Commission, and that draft went to the Planning Commission.
Correct.
And the Planning Commission acted on it.
Right.
And now this board is to consider that draft. If we want to modify that draft, we can, by doing what John Nagel did. We could modify it by doing what you're doing. But this idea that it's...
We don't need to share this draft with the public before we do this?
John...
I mean, do we or don't we?
Yes, and so if
We
we
do.
do,
We
yes,
do.
and if we do that, what we essentially start over. If we decide that John Nagel's version or your version is better, then we go back to ground zero, which means the whole thing starts again, and we go to both planning commissions and set another hearing date with a 30-day period.
Normally for an ordinance introduction, that ordinance draft is presented to the public, so they have a chance to review it. John Nagel hands me his ordinance tonight.
Yes.
No one in the public has seen that.
And so this is not an ordinance introduction. What this is us acting on the ordinance that we sent to Planning Commission 2 months ago, a month ago. And if we want to change that, we can change it. It's appropriate to change it. It's appropriate to consider all your, it's inappropriate for you to be outraged, in my opinion. That essentially this is, if you like the version that we voted on a month ago, vote for it. If you don't like it, vote against it. If you like what John Nagel proposes, then we vote to start over, and we start that whole process again.
Mr. Chairman, just to answer John's answer, I guess I'll take exception to your comment. Again, here is John, the Board of... John, let me
why
finish.
was-
Let me finish,
But
if
wait, I have
may.
a question. Why did I receive a copy of Peter Nelson's version via email from Commissioner Schaefer, but I didn't receive it from John Rice or staff? Why is the president of the board providing me a copy of a document that the public hasn't seen?
John,
that staff hasn't?
you did get a copy of that was sent to the commissioners. You all got a
Then
copy
why was
of
it
that.
not posted to a website?
But you all have it? Well, this is what the Planning Commission's recommendation is to you. This isn't even an introduction tonight, John. This is for the discussion. The issue that is problematic, John, is the Board of Commissioners need to give direction to the staff. That is the problem that we have.
I would have objected to, if that document had been sent, this board did not authorize staff to send that document out to anyone.
But the
Let
Planning
me finish, John. I
Commission-
listened to you.
Planning
Allow me to finish. This board told staff to send it to Planning Commission and have Planning Commission to review it. And if this board wants to change that, now is our time to change it. So the change is perfectly reasonable. It's discretionary if you want to do it. The outrage is, in my opinion, misplaced because now is the time to instigate the change and not be angry that you didn't have access to, or the public didn't have access. Now is the time to make that document accessible if you believe that that's the document that should be the anchor.
I would just respectfully say that whether it's the anchor or not.
You have 2
it's-
minutes.
That's
We're
fine.
going to give you more because of this
No,
back
I
and forth
appreciate
here.
it, and thank you for listening to me and hearing my remarks, and I appreciate your service, I do. I guess my point is, whether it is acted on tonight or not, I would like to think that any information with regard to this process would be posted on the website. The public, the residents have a right to that information. So I would respectfully request that you act on John's motion to utilize the Planning Commission's draft or zoning amendment. Again, it's not an ordinance, it's a zoning amendment to the ordinance as the document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Barker.
Mr. Chairman, just while someone else is coming out, I just want to make one other point here, is I think it's a very good point that Patty makes, that as these items come, this is a recommendation from the Planning Commission that goes forward, that things come through this venue here. I think that's excellent. Not the way some of these documents have been funneled directly to the Planning Commission outside this process, which I believe is wrong. And I think that needs to stop, and I'd ask the board to put that
And
issue out.
also not from the Planning Commission to the public, from this board to the Planning Commission back to this board, which is what is happening tonight, I believe.
But Peter Nelson's draft represents the Planning Commission's recommendations, and that draft was not included in our packets for
Yes,
public
and
view.
now is your time to get that document out.
Don, that isn't, we're going to
I think we've gone over this enough, John
But
Fisher.
normally it would be in the packets.
Okay.
And normally it would be in the public purview before we.
You can revisit this when we wind up.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, sir.
Planning Commission recommended denial, non-adoption.
So I've
So-
actually, Susan Stern, Newtown Square.
I mean, that's what
actually-
they recommended.
I wanted to actually
You live in
agree with
Radnor.
Mr. Curley.
You live in Radnor?
I
Or
live in
Newtown-
Radnor.
Not Newtown Square.
Newtown Square is my post office, same as
Okay, but you live
Mrs.
in
Schaefer,
Radnor.
but I
All
live in
right.
Radnor Township, same as Mr. Schaefer. Actually, Mr. Curley's correct. It's a little bit of a misnomer to say that the Planning Commission created a draft ordinance, because we did not. We recommended denial of the ordinance that was presented to us in October, the October 25th draft ordinance. We recommended denial of that unless, and then we proceeded to craft with Mr. Nelson a series of recommendations that should be added into the ordinance. And that has been publicly, I think that's in the packet, and it was on the website. And I do agree with Mr. Curley, at least in terms of how our process at Planning Commission is supposed to work. We weren't directed by the Board of Commissioners to write a draft ordinance, so we didn't.
So if you had a meeting tonight, if the Planning Commission had a meeting tonight or tomorrow, and was working with the John Fisher document that has all the changes, and we adopted those would be acceptable to the Planning Commission.
I will not speak for the entire Planning Commission. That would be inappropriate. But what I would say is that we would only be working on an ordinance that had been introduced by the Board of Commissioners and sent to the Planning Commission for review. So any ordinance correct, Mr. Curley? I mean, any
That's the
ordinance
way
that we
I
would
see it, too.
review, the process would be the Board of Commissioners would introduce it and then send it to planning. That's how our process is supposed to be. So I did see the memo. It is an accurate reflection of, for the most part, what we discussed with Mr. Higgins, at the Planning Commission, and directed Mr. Nelson to write. How it ended up in a draft ordinance, I can't say. I'm just saying that the Planning Commission did not craft that. It largely reflects everything that we discussed at our meeting, and I just wanted to make that clear. The only other point I want to make as a public citizen with regard to setbacks is this. There are a lot of passionate feelings in Radnor Township regarding the CICD and Villanova. I personally, as a Planning Commission member, tried to remember that this ordinance is supposed to be applicable to the other institutions in the township, not just Villanova. And what might be appropriate on Lancaster Avenue isn't necessarily appropriate on some of the other lands. With regard to the setbacks, and they are crafted specifically to address the fact that some institutions own property on both sides of the road in Radnor Township. But the one thing that the Delaware County Planning Commission was very consistent on, both 2 or 3 times that they received any ordinances from Radnor Township, is that they feel that the setback should be 60 feet. They reaffirmed that in subsequent reviews of the ordinance. They just feel strongly that to have the 35-foot setback would greatly change the character of Lancaster Avenue, because they were looking at it in conjunction specifically with Lancaster Avenue. I personally agree with that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Mr. Keneally, please.
Very quickly. One, as Susan had mentioned, the other campuses. As a matter of fact, the setbacks for the other campuses are greater because the other campuses affected by this, Cabrini and Eastern, are on a major collector. And actually, their setbacks are 200 feet from the right-of-way, whereas the current township ordinance only has a setback of 120 feet. So they're even set back even further. So the effect on other colleges is really minimal. And just, again, we had this whole procedural discussion. My understanding is what will happen here this evening is, one, the old ordinance, which has already been introduced, would be, a hearing date would be established for that old ordinance, or I'll refer to the Planning Commissioner, Peter Nelson's ordinance, or John Nagel's ordinance. I hate using those terms, but just so that's to clarify, would be reintroduced or introduced this evening, and a public hearing would be established on that ordinance. I understand. I believe that is procedurally where this board would be going this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Procedurally, then we could vote on it at the day of the hearing. That's the way we would do it.
Right. Hey, Nick, just a question, because the setbacks are going to impact everything, whether it's 35 feet or 60 feet. You're pushing it back from Lancaster Avenue, more or less. Isn't there some number in between there? Why is it 35 and why is it 60? Isn't there a 50-foot setback that would work, or something in between those two numbers?
John, we've kind of gone over that, through all the reiterations of the ordinance, and this is, again, I went way back, and there was very little setback, and I was called to task for that because they didn't feel that was an appropriate ordinance. But this ordinance has moved as to the setbacks concern, and this is really the setback that fits with Villanova needs and the needs we feel of the PI district. So that's where this 35 feet arrived at.
Okay, so
Are you saying your buildings couldn't be built at 65 setbacks?
That's correct. Yes.
Let's hear from more of the public.
I have a question about that. The question isn't your buildings. You don't have a plan. You have a conceptual plan. Do you have architectural drawings of the buildings at this point?
John, we have a plan. We've been showing you the plan.
No, you have a conceptual plan, but you don't have engineered architectural drawings of the
We have an
buildings?
engineered plan, I believe. I don't know, do we have architectural? Yeah, we don't have
So
detailed
there's no detail.
designs.
So the question is, could you build to the further setback and still build a structure that would accommodate a majority of your students that you plan to?
John, we
as
wouldn't
is
do it.
current?
Just
You
because
wouldn't do it?
we would not do it.
So we go, I don't know what the original setbacks were. No, not under PI. Now it's
It's 120.
120. So the township yields from 120 feet down to 35 feet. And we're saying, well, how about if we went from 120 feet down to 60 feet? We're giving you 60 feet benefit over the current zoning. And you're saying you can't build the building?
No, we would not build the building.
You would not.
Let's hear from more of the public.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mrs. Winters.
Good evening. I provided this document already to the Board of Commissioners, and I am speaking for the League of Women Voters of Radnor and the League of Women Voters of the United States, through study and positions adopted through consensus by local leagues across the nation, promotes an open governmental system that is representative, accountable, and responsive. As representatives of the wards within Radnor Township, you as board members are in a unique position to serve constituents through your legislative and executive authority. You also exercised your power as a body to appoint advisory groups, such as the Planning Commission. Members of this commission have studied, heard comments, and reviewed applications before you this evening. The League strongly encourages you to incorporate their recommendations because they are based on compatibility with the Commissioner's own approved comprehensive land use plan. They have been developed by a group whose members possess special knowledge of Pennsylvania's municipal planning codes and related subdivisions and land development codes. They promote credibility in a system that best functions through advisory groups with special knowledge and expertise, and they reflect the work of individuals with a township-wide perspective rather than that which is perhaps limited to a given ward and the constituents with whom they represent. We trust your actions this evening will be responsive to both the Radnor Planning Commission and the will of the taxpayers who have given voice to their concerns, with the expectations that such informed public participation will impact your decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta Winters. All right, is there somebody else? Matthew Marshall coming forward.
Yes, I'd like to, Matthew Marshall, 228 Walnut Avenue, Wayne. I actually came this evening to speak on the next application, but this is, I think, a cause for some concern, and I'll say this. I've only spoke publicly and have essentially expressed concern about 3 applications since I've sat on the Planning Commission. I, like Mr. Curley, had 8 years on the commission, and I felt that myself and my fellow planning commissioners had a unique ability to advise the Board of Commissioners both on our professional experience and our history in the township. The first application that I spoke publicly against was Villanova's proposed student medical center on Aldwin Lane. I felt strongly, having grown up in the area, that pocket park was essential to remain a buffer between the residents and the university. I think in Villanova's good judgment, they decided not to build that facility, and the public enjoys now a pocket park that should have always been there. Secondly, Cabrini College came before you 3 or 4 years ago with a structured parking deck that was proposed along Eagle Road in an old-growth forest. North Radnor, or the area of that location, has some of the most sort of heritage trees and forest and woodland that we have remaining in the township. Cabrini decided against building the structured parking deck, and as far as I know, maybe have considered to bring that facility into the interior of their campus. Now we have Villanova, and I'm sure that this development in some form makes sense to the community. I'm concerned about the process, and I'm very concerned that the Planning Commission's that their comments were not available publicly tonight. I don't understand why the process has moved in this direction, and I'd like the Board of Commissioners to take some time and realize that there may be a development that's worthwhile for Radnor Township and Villanova, but to make sure that this process includes public comment from the constituents who live here and pay taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Is there anybody else that would like to talk? Give us your name and street address, please.
Rick Leonardi, 30 Alwyn Lane. Relative to a point that you made, Mr. Higgins, the presentation from Villanova in May actually specified a 45-foot setback from the street. They were comfortable with 45 feet in May. The Venturi Scott Brown Associates proposal, the final recommendations that they presented to Villanova way back in '08, where they were actually toying with the idea of dorms on Main Lot and elsewhere, also specified a 45-foot setback. Where this 35-foot setback came from, don't know. Seems to have popped in. Somebody with a couple of keystrokes put it in, and we've been living with it ever since. As far as Mr. Fisher's commentary about widening Lancaster Avenue, if you consult Fred Tivani Associates traffic impact study, you will see that in fact he's already factored in as a given, as a sure thing, widening of Lancaster Avenue at Church Walk. There is going to be a right turn lane from westbound Lancaster onto Church Drive. There is going to be a left turn Q lane built from Lancaster westbound onto Church Drive, which will involve widening Lancaster by 1 lane. It's 50 feet now. It'll have to be at least 60. That additional 10 or 12 feet will undoubtedly come from the south side of Lancaster, not the north. I don't see them carving out any space from Sheehan Beach or anything like that. As far as the Ith and Lancaster intersection goes, that is now 5 lanes. It is going to be 6 lanes once the turn lane from Lancaster westbound to South Ithan is built, and that is going to be built largely because of the specific request of the Township Police. They have insisted that a turn lane be put in there and the corner be radically rounded for it. So, if it is true that per PennDOT regulation, pedestrians cannot cross more than 4 lanes without an island of safety, which is a new one on me, you will definitely be seeing islands of safety built at Church Drive, and you will certainly be seeing islands of safety built at Ithan and Lancaster. If you're curious what those look like, you only have to go to the intersection of King of Prussia Road and Lancaster to see what these islands of safety look like. They will, in turn, they themselves will occupy space and make the road that much wider. As a point of reference right now, along the long diagonal at Ithan and Lancaster, the distance is 110 feet. If you add a 6th lane, the turn lane that the police and others insist must be built there, the total distance along the long diagonal from the southwest corner to the gym is going to be 125 feet. The per PennDOT's regulations, 3.5 feet per second is what a pedestrian is figured to be able to cover. That is going to, if you do the math, it's going to be at least a 32, 36 second pedestrian phase. The pedestrian phase is now 26 seconds. The traffic impact study recommends that the pedestrian phase actually be shortened to keep the light cycles at A, B, or C there. Safety, the safety consideration is massive and is being completely ignored as far as pedestrians go there. Those are all extremely dry and technical things, but they're all there to be read in the traffic impact studies and in other documents that have been submitted to you. It's a question of doing your homework. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardi.
Commissioners, real quick on the setback issue. The ordinance is designed to accommodate any additional right-of-way that's associated with those traffic improvements would be required to be dedicated or offered for dedication by the applicant, whether it's Villanova, Eastern, or Cabrini, and the setbacks then are measured off of that new right-of-way. So the setbacks are not measured from the current right-of-way minus any road improvements. It's the right-of-way plus the road improvements, then the setbacks. So the concern of having the roads that much closer would not be applicable. At this point in time, any roadway improvements and widening and turn lanes would be part of the additional right-of-way. Setbacks would then be measured from that additional right-of-way.
Thank you. Susan, we have other people that need to speak. You've already spoken twice.
I just wanted to tell you real quick, Peter did send the email. I just found it in my inbox. Kevin pointed it out to me. So the draft ordinance was sent to us a while ago. And I just wanted to, because I had said we hadn't received it, I want you to know, he did send it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your patience through this whole process, which I know everybody would have liked if we didn't spend quite so much time on. Pardon me?
Rosemary Hessman.
Anna Marie
sorry.
Hessman, Rosemont resident, grew up in Rosemont, came back. Barleycone Lane, which adjoins Pike Field. And actually, I'd like to include some pictures while I talk,
Okay.
if you don't mind. These are a couple years old, but this happened again this year, so they're perfectly relevant. Do I put it face up or face down? Okay. Whoops. This is a shot, graduation 2 years ago, from my backyard. This is ground level on Barleycone Lane. As you can see, there's a lot of parking. A lot of it's all over Pike Field, and we'll get a better view of that in the future shots. But you can also see lovely sky, green trees. Quality of life. A number of my neighbors are very concerned. They don't come to the meetings because they're late. They go on and on and on. Some of them don't feel they're making much headway if they do show up. But there's a lot of concern in my immediate neighborhood about the impact on quality of life. Currently, we have heavy traffic, noise pollution, light pollution. When I grew up in the area, there was noise from Villanova. It's almost like, you know, a kind of a warm home feeling to have that noise spill over during the daytime on the week, during events and games. You know, I like that spirit. It has increased quite a lot in my lifetime. And the light pollution that we've been struggling with, it's significantly increased. That's not what I grew up with. I wasn't aware that they put in these giant floodlights when I moved back. So a little bit of a surprise. Moving on to the next. Okay. This is I had to kind of go over the fence to get. What happens right now in a very popular event is they run out of space. It spills over onto the field. It spills over into adjacent neighborhoods. All these people have to go in and out. And on the surface parking lots, there are multiple places they can go in and out. And when we're talking about traffic congestion increasing, one of the things we're talking about with a recommendation of putting it all in one place is that all the cars get funneled into that one place. I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that sounds really, really bad to me from a mechanical perspective. Also, probably not very good for the field. And we do get a lot of the spillover into our neighborhoods. So there's existing quality of life, and then there's what we imagine will happen to us. And as you can see, even though a lot of people have been talking about it being an ugly macadam as they come down the pike, when you take away those cars, we have basically a park at present. Okay, so moving on, this is from the second story of my house. So you can see some of the light posts that shine directly towards my house at present. And you can probably imagine, if you turn out the lights, or, you know, make it dark, imagine the headlights when someone leaves an event at 9 p.m. Now imagine 4 rows of stacked headlights aimed directly at the house. Currently, I believe that Barleycone residents are not defined as adjacent neighbors in the language of what is proposed before you. We would not be afforded light protection. We would not be afforded I believe there was noise protection, buffering, stuff like that. Some lovely requirements that have made their way into the ordinance. So while I support fully actually what the Planning Commission spent all that time working on, they still haven't addressed really important quality of life substantive issues that we need addressed. And the setbacks, I think it's kind of shocking to imagine going down from 120 feet to less than 60, which is halfway to 0. The Planning Commission, actually the Delaware County Planning Commission, this was included in shoot, I think it was included in the packet given to you or the Planning Commission in one of the meetings in October or December. But the Delaware County Planning Commission essentially said, addressing institutional growth while remaining consistent with the district's prevailing purpose of preserving the open character of large areas is the challenge. Due to the location of the CICD, development will have an effect on not only the residents of the institution, but the overall community as well. For this reason, if at all feasible, it is recommended that the university consider alternative locations for the CICD, which are more interior to the campus, to remain consistent with the predominant purpose of the existing PI district and to address a more concentrated development scheme for continued growth. Regulations should be drafted to achieve a compromise of these two objectives, which are opposed to each other. Prior to adoption, the township should incorporate the following recommendations. Increase the required setback from arterial and major collector right-of-way to at least 60. I'm not saying less than 60. But I assume you've all read that, but not all the public has seen this. And I think it's really important that they know that it's not just one planning commission, it's multiple planning commissions. They're saying this is not ready. It's far from ready.
All right. Thank you, Ann.
Just as information, Mr. Chairman, that is on the website for anyone to look at.
Philip R.
Good evening, Philip R., Meredith Avenue. One of the reasons why we're having problems with this is because of the size and the setbacks. The reason is because they are too close. It's too close for safety, it's too close for scale, and that's why there's a lot of pushback for it. And it's not just from residents. Just to sum it up, you've got 3 times the Delaware County Planning Commission has called this to attention and said that a setback less than 60 feet would greatly negatively affect the scale of the area. And also some of the safety issues. Your own Planning Commission has said the same thing exactly. I urge you on a procedural basis, if you're going to set this for hearings tonight, and set a date for it, that the ordinance that you set is the one that the Planning Commission has set. If this is not to be Villanova's ordinance, but it's to be Radnor's ordinance, then it should be the Planning Commission's ordinance. And I support Commissioner Fisher's efforts to include their language that they laboriously spent over several meetings to line by line go through this to make it a truly Radnor-friendly and Radnor-appropriate ordinance, and make that the ordinance that you have the hearing on, and from there you have your arguments and go from there. Thank you.
Commissioners, to touch on the 60-foot setback that is mentioned in the county review, they were not steadfast in the 60-foot because they do reference in the next sentence that setbacks be considered on a case-by-case basis for a reduction from the 60 feet. So they weren't firm in the 60-foot, but on a case-by-case, which I wouldn't recommend.
Kevin, I have to ask you probably a naive question, but looking down 10 years or 15 years, and there is a need to put another lane on Lancaster Avenue between roughly Route 320 and the eastern end of the campus. What do you visualize with a 35-foot setback if that happens?
Well, that wouldn't only affect this project, but every project along Lancaster Avenue or any project along any road that PennDOT decides that they want to increase the roadway and acquire right-of-way. We've seen it on the Turnpike, we've seen it on the Blue Route. Look at downtown Wayne, where you have buildings right up on the road with 0-foot setbacks. I can't predict what would happen in 25, 30 years. I think a 35-foot setback would be enough room, in addition to whatever roadway improvements would be required now, to add additional turn lanes or through lanes. I think you're more problematic in other areas of the township because I don't think PennDOT would just do it just in that area. That further down Villanova Shopping Center would be extremely problematic to do additional
Well, that
roadway.
doesn't make it any better for Villanova. Why are you saying if it happens elsewhere, it's
just a second.
It's worse.
The setback is not from the curb line.
Correct. Setback is from the right-of-way line.
And the right-of-way already incorporates enough space for another lane.
Just one lane. But you know, John had to deal with 5 points in Bryn Mawr. MJ Test Prep is, I believe, 5 feet from the curb. The corner of their building is 5 feet from the curb. That's poor planning. That's not our fault. That happened 35 years ago. And all I'm asking for is that these setbacks are adequate so that we can't tell the future. But boy, won't we look dumb if and PennDOT comes in and widens the road 1 lane each way and puts an island of safety in the middle. Then what? So now we're 30 feet wider. So again, I'm going to stay. I just have to insist that you guys consider this. The fact that I respect each and every one of us is intelligent and can come to our own opinion, but we have 2 planning commissions, and each planning commission has multiple members, and those planning commissions agreed that a larger setback is prudent, it's good planning, and it's good long-term planning. And every time we try to squeeze something in, we pay for it later. And John had to pay for it. Bryn County Line Road does a zigzag because there's not enough room because the setbacks weren't adequate. No one imagined widening 5 points over Bryn Mawr Hospital, that road. They never imagined it. Well, they had to widen it. So, just think 30 years out.
I have something that I'd like to say. It's Amy over on the right. Hi. There's been a lot of discussion about the traffic and what is and what isn't and things that have been proposed. The traffic impact study that was submitted by Frank Tavani. And I just wanted to clarify that to date, we have not received a formal review of that impact study from PennDOT. We have quite a few outstanding comments that I have prepared for the township. And as to date, PennDOT has not identified what improvements they're going to require on Lancaster Avenue. So I think the setback question is going to be off of the right-of-way, which has yet to be determined. And it could potentially affect the project for them. But be clear that in the future, if there's a need for widening, PennDOT is not going to be short-sighted and not allow for that to be considered. And I want to assure you of that. So I understand your concerns, but the place to reserve that widening is not in a setback. It's in your right-of-way.
And so, Amy, as I understand what you're saying and what Kevin's saying is that if during the land development process, it will be determined that the widening is necessary, then everything gets pushed back and the building gets pushed back accordingly. So it's not the setback isn't coming out of a turning lane.
Correct.
Everything slides back accordingly.
Correct. It would be based on that right-of-way that is determined in the future during the land development process and the highway occupancy permitting process. And as far as the pedestrian safety, I can guarantee you that PennDOT's going to make sure that their needs are being accommodated. I understand what the gentleman is saying, and I agree with him and have commented back that there will be an increase in timing at Ithan and Lancaster because we are widening the roadway and it will take longer for pedestrians to cross it. We probably would not put in a pedestrian refuge because we would make sure that those crossings are accommodated within the cycle length. And I don't think it's something that's necessary there. I'm not sure where the information that you received about putting it in for anything over 4 lanes. I haven't seen that, but maybe there's some literature that you saw on that.
Generally, the PennDOT's frowning on the middle lane, correct, for pedestrians? There's a movement away from that. That's my understanding.
Well, you don't want to use it if it's an open, but if it's a protected island with good ADA facilities through it, sometimes they'll be put in. But what that can do is obstruct your turning movements for vehicles turning from the intersection. So sometimes what we do is we'll put a pork chop on the turning lane, so we'll move those pedestrians into a more visible location without compromising the turning movements to the left turns. I'm sure you've seen them in different areas where you take the pedestrians and cross them over that right turn lane, and then they would continue across from that point across to the other side. So there are different alternatives that can be considered to make sure that the pedestrians are accommodated.
I just want to comment. We're discussing 5 points. So County Line Road is a state road. And at some point, PennDOT opined on the right-of-way width of that road, especially when Bryn Mawr Hospital was being built and all of the business district. So if we rely on PennDOT to look ahead 30 years, all due respect, I don't trust them. I'm asking that we build in some extra protection so that in the future, if it happens, we don't have buildings, 10 feet from the roadway. So I just...
Then insist that your right-of-way is greater.
I mean, your ordinance sets up what those right-of...
No, PennDOT could come back later. After there's a traffic jam, PennDOT comes back 10 years later and says, we need to take some more of the roadway here. We need to make more roadway here.
Well, I think where we're at right now is we've incorporated the right turn lane on the westbound approach that was discussed. And there are some queuing techniques that we've been discussing with the police department and with Villanova. So a lot of these things are still moving pieces that we're trying to figure out how to make sure that we don't get those. And I truly believe that this is going to be better for the traffic in the area. I'm confident that it will be. There's a lot of things that we need to address. There's a lot of comments that have been remaining outstanding, but they're to be determined during land development and during discussions with PennDOT, but we have a lot of really good ideas of what we can do.
All right, I'd like to move ahead.
John, call the vote.
Yeah, I'd like to move ahead for the vote. Is there, barring anybody that really needs to say anything further, let's see, we have a motion
We'll
to...
vote on John's first.
Commissioner Fisher's motion is to send forward to a public hearing the ordinance that was provided to the board by Solicitor Peter Nelson, which contains all of the changes recommended by the Planning Commission. Right?
You got it.
All in favor of John Fisher's motion, say aye.
Aye.
I see 4-2.
Well,
And-
you didn't ask for opposed yet.
Okay, I'm sorry. All those opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, the motion fails 2-4 with Elaine Schaefer not voting. Then the next item on the table is...
I'd like to make a motion to amend John Nagel's version to include 45-foot setbacks, because that information was brought to light, that Villanova had in their original plan, 45-foot setbacks. So my motion is to change the setbacks from 35 foot.
Sit down, sit down.
Second.
Well,
Okay.
it's got a second.
Let's vote. All those in favor of Mr. Fisher's motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
No. And the motion fails 2-4 with one abstention, one not voting. The motion fails 2-4 with Elaine Fisher not voting. Elaine Schaefer, I'm sorry. As you see, I'm not used to being chair. Now, Commissioner Nagel's motion. John, would you restate your motion?
Well, my motion was to use the basis. The basis of the Peter Nelson amendment, but I rejected some of his recommendations, and I also did a little wordsmithing, and that has been handed out to everyone here.
And so my understanding is that...
And you're setting a hearing date in your motion?
Well, if this passes, then I'll
Okay, all right.
move this at the hearing date.
A request, we recite again there's John's changes to the document so we're clear. The big one is the setbacks, but what else?
I can go through this. I made notes as John was.
Please.
So just
Mr. Solicitor.
procedurally, just generally, before you do that, what you would do then is you would take the modifications as proposed by John.
Your mic, Don.
Pardon? The modifications as proposed by John and presumably approved by the board, and then
Right.
you would create a new version, and
Correct.
essentially we would restart the process by going to both planning commissions.
It would have to go
30-day
back.
window for, and then at the end of 30 days, we would have a hearing.
You'd set a
And
hearing
we would
date.
be able to vote on it if we chose to.
Correct. Correct. So the substantive changes that John called out really start on page 4 of this draft. And the substantive changes are on page 4, and this is the Planning Commission's proposed revisions. The dimensional regulations are in paragraph 2A through actually F on the next page, but they would remain the same. The 35 feet and the existing setbacks would remain the same. Paragraph 2E, which is the setback from intersections, would not be included. 2F, dealing with setbacks 100 feet from the boundary of any single lot used for single-family residential purposes would remain. On page 5, the provision regarding elevators and stair towers, which are struck by the Planning Commission, would remain. Paragraph 4, that states where the proposed CICD is adjacent to other contiguous lands owned by the applicant, that paragraph, and that are not separated by roads, that would remain. At the bottom of page 5, there's a, in the first line, total building coverage. There's a may struck, and that would go to a shall. I think that was something that Peter called out. On page 6, the individual building coverage, there was some language struck there that would remain in, involving individual building coverage. The provision under maximum impervious surface, paragraph 2, regarding stormwater calculations for imperviouses exceeding 45%, that would be deleted. That would not stay in that paragraph. On page 7, the language regarding the buffer planting strip, which was struck, would stay in, so that would that buffer requirement would be required unless waived by the Board of Commissioners. That would stay. On down under this is under the special regulations section, C2. There's a provision regarding the preserved lands that was added by the Planning Commission. That would stay in. C3, the sentence which was added by the Planning Commission would read as follows. Some of that gets deleted, according to Mr. Nagel's motion. The last sentence would read, the preserved land shall not include areas within rights-of-way or easements or areas that are already preserved or protected, period. The rest of that, or required setbacks, or that are otherwise undeveloped, they would be deleted.
So that change right there, John, what is that doing? That's on C3, 3C3.
Yeah, C3, the first sentence would remain as is. The second sentence would be revised to read, the preserved lands shall not include areas within rights-of-way or easements or areas that are already preserved or protected, and then a period.
So the words that are stricken are, it would say rights-of-way or easements or required setbacks.
That would be struck.
And then the other last line, or that are otherwise undevelopable.
That would be.
So what's this changes? What is that language that has now shown a strike through? What effectively does that change in this provision?
Mr. Nagel, you want to address that?
My concern with this specifically was the way it was written, it could actually eliminate the Aldwin Lane Park as the viable preserved land. Because, and it's also, to me, the word fair comes to mind, but it's not proper that land that's in a right-of-way is excluded. We don't do that anywhere else. The land in the right-of-way is always included. So it was inconsistent with our other zoning.
I mean, it looks to me like you're not including preserved lands. There's two categories. One would be setbacks. I mean, that's a zoning requirement. It's not really a preserved land is what's being struck, or land that's otherwise undevelopable.
And this provision is more protective, not less protective, correct?
Yes.
So it's not, yes.
So the only other, actually I have a couple more that Mr. Nagel, on page 9, under mechanical, electrical equipment and trash, paragraph 2, there was a change. The word equipment was inserted in there, and the word ground mounted was struck, and that change would remain. On page 10, there's under conditional use plans, paragraph 1, there's a word change from track to campus. boundaries plan, that would remain. The provision regarding the housing, facilities, room size, that would not stay in, that would be deleted from this draft. And,
John, excuse me, is that the room, and Kevin Kachansky, the room dimensions, is that treated anywhere else in our zoning code? And what is the current number?
Does what? Is that a building code requirement?
No, it's actually in our current PI, and I believe the numbers are 70 and 50. 70 square feet, as it was written.
So 50 square feet for so I did some measuring at home on this, and a twin bed is about 30 to 35 square feet. So the student would have a bed, and they'd only have 15 square feet to have a desk and be able to get dressed and do everything. I mean, to me, this seems...
This is a minimum standard.
Yeah, I understand that. And
The
I have yet to
university
be
is
in a
certainly
dorm.
not going to build dorm.
I've yet to be in a dorm that exceeded these minimums, but, so I'm concerned.
Is K staying in or coming out? I was interpreting John Rice or John Nagel's.
I was
coming
delete
out.
it,
Coming out, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's covered elsewhere, it's
Yes.
duplicative.
But.
Now, if we want
Well,
to, we can go back and modify the other
Does it need to be in the
code.
CICD if it's in the PI?
No.
I mean, does PI
The other regulations that aren't modified by this stay.
stay? Okay.
Yeah.
So that would stay out. That is the last revision that I have from Mr. Nagel.
I'd like to move some more amendments to John's motion.
So, is point of order, is this just dilatory?
No, I'm not going to do the setbacks. I've done that.
Okay, but the last two, we voted on them, and
Well, Don, I think I have a right to, if I don't get a second.
not to be
it ends.
dilatory, though. That's part of.
It won't be. This is an important one to me. This is page 5, the provision number 4. And I apologize, I don't have all the call-outs on this, but where the proposed CICD is adjacent to other contiguous lands owned by the applicant that are not separated by roads, railroad property lines, or rights of way, no setback shall be required regardless of the district zoning. Villanova. Oh, you did say that. I apologize.
change
It's struck-
unacceptable.
Well, it's struck on my copy,
It's-
but, okay, so that's back in?
Yeah,
Right, that
because
was-
John is saying that has to stay in, striking that is unacceptable.
Right. That stays in.
I thought he struck it.
No.
No, this is the planning commission's
Yeah,
Anything I did is in blue,
recommendation.
John.
I apologize. Okay, so that's quick.
You got it, you're successful.
There, I instant win, see?
Let's go to the next one, come on.
I think it's
You're
just
on
due diligence, again. I'm trying to avoid this coming back to multiple hearings, so. And John, you have, on page 6, you have made a comment here, this is item 2, I2, impervious surfaces. When determining existing conditions for stormwater calculations, any impervious surfaces exceeding 45% of the CIC site shall be considered meadow. Mr. Kachansky, is that in the PI already or not? Because John's stating it's duplicative.
Not in the current PI district.
No, that
Stormwater
language-
management regulations are
Is that in the
regulated under a
stormwater?
separate ordinance.
It exceeds our current stormwater requirements. So what I'm saying is, I don't believe that there's anything so magical about a CICD that it needs its own.
Okay, so my motion is to put that back in, and my reasoning is that because the CICD is affording the applicant such relief against the current zoning, this is the time to ask for additional provisions, especially with stormwater. So again, we're reducing the setbacks from 120 feet down to 35 feet. We're allowing, and the rear setbacks being reduced, I don't know what, from a very large number to a very small number. Again, the change here was impervious surface. And the Planning Commission really talked about this quite a bit. So my motion is to to keep the planning commission's recommendation. This is maximum impervious surfaces I2.
Jim Higgins,
Well, is there a
my
second?
opinion is that the, I'm sorry.
Is there a second?
Wait.
Hearing no second.
This is page 6. Maximum impervious surfaces I2.
All right, also, I think, John, I think I misunderstood too. Let's go back to page 5 on number 4.
No, let's stick with the one we're doing now, the motion he has.
Yeah.
Do you want to second it or not?
Well, but wait, he wanted to do this other one.
Well, John told me that he's not striking.
You're confused.
No, it is strict. Yeah, he's not striking it, which means that there won't be any setback.
That's right. You're confused.
Okay.
So you do want that?
I want that.
All right. So I
Right.
just think, Jim, for you to decide, I think this is dilatory. We voted on each of these.
Well, I'll go back to
and-
it.
But you can't, we voted on them, and now we can't go back through
Okay.
them one by one. So it's your
Well,
decision,
yeah, no,
Jim, but
Don,
I think we already
agree.
did this.
I agree, because you guys already voted it down, so whether.
Yes, we did vote on
there
these.
was-
I mean-
Well, we didn't vote that down because we assumed it was already, I assumed it was taken care of. We didn't put it to motion.
No, it was included in the motion.
It was
that failed.
included in the motion, and,
It was?
I mean, I know, I believe I understood it when we voted on it. I don't know if others did.
Anything more?
If you have
Okay.
something new, I think it's appropriate to present it, but I don't think it's appropriate to
That's fine.
go through the ones that we already voted on one by one.
No, that's fair.
Jim, let's call the question and vote.
Right.
No,
I
hold on,
don't-
Bill. Bill, due diligence. There's only a few more items that John pulled out. I just want to make sure that we all understand it. Remember, we're all seeing John, the Board of Commissioners is seeing John Nagel's draft for the first time 1 minute before the meeting started. So, the discussion started. So look, if I had a week to review this, I'd be very comfortable voting for it, but I want to go through these.
Right, so John, you want to keep in that duplicative stormwater thing?
Yeah, I want to
It doesn't hurt, it already applies anyway. It doesn't, you said it's duplicative.
It's a meadow, I mean,
The addition of a
it's
meadow
a meadow,
requirement
it's
is
a meadow
not in the
standard, which
current.
doesn't exist now.
Yeah, and
in
I'm
your
asking.
stormwater.
Duplicative in
And
that
I'm
we
asking-
have
I'm asking-
stormwater ordinance, and that's.
Yes, so my motion stands. I'd like this to remain in, because the planning commission discussed this, and the point is, when you're granting this much relief to an applicant, if you don't ask for something in return, what's the point?
So Jim Higgins, we voted on this twice already.
Second.
This particular one, we voted twice on.
Don, we didn't vote on this item.
I
I
call
don't
the
know what
question
it
and
wasn't even
motion
second
second.
until just now. So it's
Motion
second.
second.
The Nagel motion has been moved and
No,
seconded.
we're voting on, John Fisher has an
Yeah,
amendment
no,
on
I've
the
got this,
floor.
this one. This was just second.
Call the question on his motion.
On the meadow?
So this is on
Both of
maximum
them,
impervious surface
four and
I2.
2. I understood it to be 4 and 2.
All right. Just
No,
call the question.
let's do I2 right now. This is
All right,
page
just two.
6.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. It fails 2 to 4.
no problem.
All right, this is,
This is, let's see, we're almost done. I'd like to motion to keep the wording that the planning commission stated in, this is page 7, special regulations, repairing buffer setback, no, I'm sorry, C3. So this is the preserved land shall consist of one contiguous area which is not separated or divided by the parcels, streets, driveways, vehicular access ways, or railroad easements or rights-of-way. The preserved land shall not include areas within rights-of-way or easements. And John, did you do the, I'm sorry, the colors aren't coming through that
We
clear to me.
took out or required setbacks.
Right.
and
Or
that
areas. So I'd
are
like
otherwise
all the,
underway.
I'd like all the original wording to remain. No deletions.
All right, that's a
Is there a
motion.
second?
well, just to understand, I think that we said that this one, I understood this to be more beneficial, right? Didn't John is trying
Well, no,
to...
Don characterized it as more restrictive, and I
Yes.
read it as less
So-
restrictive.
Okay, we already voted on it, it's dilatory, but we're going to
Yeah,
treat
right.
it.
Are you seconding? Do we need to second? Are you
Well, I
seconding?
need to understand the provision. I thought that this was helpful, and now I'm hearing that it's not helpful.
Well, because it's not, when you take away required setbacks, and you take away that are otherwise undevelopable, that's not less restrictive, I'm sorry, that becomes less restrictive. So the planning commission took a lot of time to come up with that concept that we're not going to give credit where credit isn't due.
Yeah, but John Nagel says we're going to lose Aldwin Lane as a buffer if we write it this way.
No, we're not going to give them credit for Aldwin Lane Park.
All right. Are you second the motion?
Isn't that what you said?
Come on.
No, I said.
Let's go.
Everyone, all along, we've been, part of my goals has been to end up with Aldwin Lane being undeveloped. And this is a way to make that happen. If we change this, Aldwin Lane won't qualify, and therefore it could go to development.
Well,
so I'm trying to make this work for us.
but how does striking required setbacks?
Because the plot will be too small to meet the requirements if you take out all the setbacks and all that stuff.
Well, then it's not developable. So
No. Only for the purposes of this.
I'm sorry, I don't agree.
You made your motion.
Yeah, I have a motion, but the otherwise undevelopable, I'll remind all of us that there was an applicant that was supposed to be in caucus tonight, that one of the biggest issues that we had was that they weren't setting aside enough land. And I won't get specific because I don't want to impugn that, but the point is that, John, you had particular issue with the caucus tonight because there was land not being set aside because they were trying to include land that was undevelopable, right? Or right away. So, I'm trying to be fair.
I don't hear a second, so.
I'll second, okay?
Why?
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No.
Opposed.
It fails 2-4 with Elaine not voting. Is that all you have, Commissioner?
Let me just review.
All right, the only observation I would make before we vote on the Nagel motion is why do we as a board think that, and why would the applicant think that preserved lands have to be within the CICD or within 500 feet of it? If you have valuable land that can't be saved otherwise, then wouldn't it make sense to allow the applicant to go outside even the campus?
No, the preserved land
To preserve that land.
has been thought of in terms of buffering to the residential community.
And also reward for those that, or not reward, but mitigation for those that might be impacted. My understanding is that that was a provision that changed through our 2-year process.
Yep.
All right, let's call the question.
All right, all those in favor of the Nagel motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed.
The motion passes 4-2. All right.
Set the hearing date now because that wasn't.
Procedurally, do we need yes, we need a motion to set the hearing date.
We have to send it to planning, with the motion to send it to planning, right?
Do we have
set
the
the hearing
motion to
date?
send it to planning?
Yeah, you should set a hearing.
Yes.
No, there was a different question.
No, it'll go automatically.
Right. So what's
Under
the
the code,
next
okay.
meeting that we can have this hearing?
It would be February 10th.
I move that we set a hearing date for February 10th.
Second?
Any discussion from commissioners?
Well, I think,
Please, not to go over any of
No,
the
I won't.
substantive issues.
but the planning commission has been playing catch-up to this process that we've implemented, this new process of approving zoning ordinances where the planning commission doesn't get to finish their work and we go ahead and act. So I'm against setting the date.
Not what we're doing. We're
Well-
not finishing our process. We're starting it tonight.
So but what I'm against is I've been on this board for 6 years, going on my 7th year, and I don't recall setting hearing dates until we send it to the planning commission first, and it comes back from planning to us, then we set a hearing date.
Do you think we should not take into account that this applicant has been before the Township of Radnor government for 20 months, and that to send it back to planning without moving it forward for a hearing date would be not consistent with our policy of treating
we're
all
also-
applicants fairly?
We're also
There's no
essentially
time
returning
clock
the
under
document to planning that they sent us minus one substantive change, which we had a difference of opinion on planning. So what planning is going to get is a document that they've seen before and addressed on many occasions.
But there were other recommendations in terms of stormwater, which we did not really address tonight in detail. We had the River Keepers recommendations, which were many pages, very numerous. None of those got motioned to be put in. Again, when the township's giving relief to an applicant, that's when you ask for these things. And if we're not asking for it, we're going to give the Planning Commission one meeting to do stormwater review, setback review, and then they're going to have to give us an opinion. Peter Nelson will have to write it up, and he's going to get that to the public, and all this is going to work. So, again, the frustrations come out in me tonight. I've been on this board a long time. It took us 2.5 years to get Garrett Hill through, and at no point were drafts of that ordinance surprisingly showing up at the commissioners a minute before the meeting. So, all due respect to everyone in the room, I'm not happy with the process. And the Planning Commission wasn't happy with the process. We had members of the Planning Commission come in here. Normally, we vote to send it to the Planning Commission. When they're done their due diligence, it comes back, we set a hearing date, and then we move on. This will be the first time that I can recall where we're setting a hearing date at the meeting that we're introducing. I've never heard of it.
Well, just wait. And we still have more of the meeting, so this might not be the first time, but it might not be the last. But I would say this is the difficulty, right? John has been on here 6 or 7 years. I've been on here 60 or 70 minutes, or maybe double that, whatever it is. It is very difficult for the board to know what this is going to do because we're not passing or reviewing a specific project. We have this ordinance. These ordinances, I hear this from the constituents, we don't like conditional use ordinances or special, and this sounds to me, the whole ordinance is kind of comical. The whole ordinance sounds like spot zoning. But we should stay away from doing this altogether because we can't even tell exactly what it is. I would say also, John, I expect the Planning Commission to come back with the exact same recommendations, and I don't know what this board is going to do if they do that. So I guess we'll ignore them again, which I don't think is the right way to go.
All right. Call the question on the, so we said, John, you make a motion on the hearing date? Yes. Did I second it?
Yes.
Second it?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The motion passes 4-2.
Just as a point of reference, that memo was distributed to the Board of Commissioners on December 12th. And the board has had it since December 12th. So it's not a minute before the meeting.
From Peter Nelson, right?
That's correct.
And it was in the packet, and it was probably on the website, so that was not kept from the public.
Okay, next
Right,
item,
I'm
Don.
turning things back over to the permanent chair.
Don, would you like to introduce the next item?
No, somebody else.
Okay, the next item is setting a hearing date on an ordinance 2013-20, amending Chapter 280 of the Radnor Township Zone Code zoning ordinance by establishing regulations for a new mixed-use special transportation development use within the PLO Plan Laboratory Office District. Now, this is not quite as confusing as the last issue that we just had in front of us, in that there is an ordinance that was introduced by this board on the 16th of December. That was drafted and amended by staff, and we introduced that. That is the text that we are setting a hearing date for. Now, Delco Planning has issued an opinion on it. They did so just recently. And our Planning Commission will be addressing it and issuing their opinion or recommendation tomorrow night.
Well, will they be issuing the recommendation, or they're going to review it tomorrow night?
We'll see what happens.
Well, they've already reviewed it, and in fact, the most recent draft includes prior comments of theirs.
Okay, so when we had, the recommended hearing date is the 27th. Now, for that to, the 27th, excuse me, of January. For that to occur, for us to actually have a hearing date on the ordinance that has been introduced, that we introduced, we would not be making any changes as is potentially recommended by the Planning Commission tomorrow evening. So that would be the scenario in which we would actually have a hearing on the 27th. If tomorrow the Planning Commission has suggested changes, and if this board takes those suggested changes and they're substantive, then we would not have a hearing, we would not be able to have a hearing on the 27th. It would have to be reintroduced. And we would just, at that point, postpone or reschedule the hearing that we set. So setting of a hearing tonight on the 27th is for the chance that the ordinance, that the Planning Commission doesn't recommend any changes, or they recommend changes that we reject. And if that doesn't happen, the process will start again.
All right, so I'm recommending the approval of the introduction of the ordinance, approval. What am I doing, John?
Setting a hearing date.
Setting the hearing
Just
date.
setting a hearing date. I
Yes.
move for ordinance 2013-20, set a hearing date for January 27th.
Move,
Okay, so I have, the cart seems before
was
the
there a
horse.
second?
right, I know, no, I'm not seconding it. I'm going to move to table this. I want to move the table.
I'll second the motion.
Okay,
All right,
it's
so
been moved and
Elaine,
seconded.
I think I'm confused again. Again, 7 years on the board. I've never had to set a hearing date for an ordinance that hasn't been completed through planning and where I haven't gotten planning's recommendations. Normally, you get planning's recommendations, it comes back to us from
John,
planning.
may I interrupt?
Yes.
Is that accurate? I'm not sure if that is accurate or not.
Well,
That's
it's in the municipal planning code that's how you do it, and
No,
that's how we've
because-
done it. So
But I don't know if it is or not. That's what I'm not.
Oh, I'm certain
not-
it is.
I'm not telling you you're wrong.
I
I'm
will send you a
asking
copy of the municipal
Well,
planning
John,
code tomorrow.
commissioners would not vote to set a hearing date unless they were satisfied with the current ordinance.
But how can
If-
we be satisfied if we haven't gotten the planning commission's
No,
comments?
I'm satisfied without those comments right now. If they come up with
Oh.
something spectacular, then we'll
Yes.
consider that.
And that's my understanding of how we traditionally do it.
That's not
That-
how we traditionally do it.
Well, okay.
Again,
We-
7 years, Don, all
But
due
I've been on
respect.
the board a long time too, and I have a different
Doesn't matter how
recollection.
we did it. This
Yeah.
is, the process is,
When we get to the end and we have details, like we're addressing, that it is not inappropriate to follow the procedure that we're following.
So the procedure I'm stating is that normally the planning commission's comments come back to the Board of Commissioners. We decide whether we want to accept them or deny or implement them. And if we don't, then we set a hearing date. And what we're being asked to do tonight is set a hearing date without having the benefit of hearing from the
Yes.
planning commission.
And
Right,
what you
and
can-
if there are
what you
any
can do
changes-
is reject it at the time of the hearing
Right.
if you decide you
And,
don't like
and,
it.
and for
Or
the
just postpone
residents,
the hearing.
the residents generally reflect to me that if it gets to the hearing date, we all know the commissioners can vote on this at the end of that hearing. So the chance for the residents to reflect on the planning commission and our decision whether or not those comments are in there is minimized.
John's absolutely right. This is not ripe to set a hearing date. It should be tabled. And also, substantively, I have issues with the ordinance as it is, right? I mean, there's substantively, well, here's the thing. John's absolutely right. The planning commission has never seen this ordinance. They were looking at a separate, they were looking at the second iteration of this ordinance. They had a laundry list of things they were looking at before Thanksgiving. They never provided it, right? We went ahead and took control of this and now presented what we expected that they are going to approve. They haven't looked at it. It's the cart before the horse. We should just table this. We'll set a hearing. All you have to do is wait till tomorrow. We can go do this at the next
Would you
meeting.
like to make a motion to table?
I did, well, there's,
Go ahead and make a motion.
procedurally, there was another motion ahead of mine, but I did want to make a motion to table, which we should consider first.
Second the motion to table.
all right, let's call the vote.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote on that.
Madam President, if I may, just a comment, just as a point, I guess, of clarification for the administration, at least for myself. We've been at this for, I think, 18 months already, if maybe a little bit longer. The Planning Commission has given a lot of input throughout this process, and Kevin has made numerous revisions incorporating a lot of these changes. So the perception that this just mysteriously, appeared out of nowhere is completely wrong. This has been a work in progress for a long time, working back and forth between the commissioner's comments, the Planning Commission's comments as well. At some point in time, you're going to have to make a decision. And what I'd ask the board is if you're not satisfied, vote it down, we start it back again. But at some point, you can't keep going month after month, 18, 20, 22, and we're spinning in certain areas. I think what Kevin has done, I think, is a tremendous job with Amy and Roger and Steve, the police department and their units with both of these, have incorporated a lot of things that have been heard from the public as well as from that. Granted, there may be some disagreement on this, but at some point, You either have to give direction to say, this is no good, or we got to keep going on or make adjustments, because these changes have been being incorporated as we have gone along through this process. So just for
Thank
point
you,
of
Bob.
clarification.
We appreciate that. There's a motion to table and a second on the floor. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Opposed?
It fails 2-7.
All right.
2-5. All right, now
I
there's
have-
a motion to
I
set
have
a...
substantive issues that I want to address.
Okay.
So,
As do I. Go ahead.
okay, I'm content with the decision to vote tonight. Similar to Bob, I think we got to move toward in the direction of an up-down vote, and it's appropriate for me to my opinion, it's appropriate to proceed the way we're proceeding. I have issues with its the substantive issues. I think they have to be addressed. So I want to consider a different version or a version with differences. One is I still think it's much too complex for most of us to understand. I still don't have an adequate understanding of it to know if it's going to work. A couple of the concerns. One is I think we have inadequate triggers. So my concern is that we have the transit and the transit-oriented development, but if those triggers don't work, essentially what we just get is more development that is auto-oriented. And I'm afraid that that's what we're going to have. I think the triggers are insufficient. I think we need the parking issue, we discussed this last time. We need very strong parking maximums, not marginally reduced parking minimums. I think it's been shown in planning that transit-oriented development is problematic if the automobiles are still able to access the site. So that's one of the changes. I also think we have to address the issue of the non-market rate housing. It's not family-oriented housing, which is problematic. I think it's problematic to the school district. I think the intent was to protect the school district, but when you structure zoning to prohibit people who are going from using the schools, you're essentially structuring zoning to make the development non-supportive of the school, and that's ultimately problematic. So I think it's going to have it's going to be counterproductive to the intent. There's elements of it that violate general planning. One, there was a time where we segregated by race, ethnicity, income. We've recognized that's a problem. Now we're segregating by age. I think it's going to take us decades to realize that's a problem, but my sense is that's a problem. It's a mistake to try to force age-related housing on this ordinance. I'm also not sure that one-bedroom units are trip productive the way we want them to be. I mean, that's a detail that I can get from our engineer, but I'd be concerned that by having the non-market rate housing, we're actually inducing more trips than if we had market rate housing. My fourth point is that there are alternatives. We can add the residential component and the mixed use without the density modification, without giving the bonus density. That's what I would like to consider first. I don't see why we need the bonus density to have the mixed use. We would lose the traffic modifications, but I think the traffic modifications are in and of themselves problematic in that oftentimes the solution is worse than the problem. So I'm troubled by that. Where do we go? Multiple choice. So we could adopt this. We could adopt this with stronger triggers, which I would like. We could adopt this with either no bonus or less bonus to make it less trip intensive, or we could take no action. My guess is I'm not closed to this, but I'm not convinced that this is going to do what we want it to do, and I think we need to look at the triggers in particular before we approve it. So I don't anticipate voting in support of it tonight for that reason.
Okay, I have just two very discrete substantive issues that I wanted to bring up tonight before it goes to planning tomorrow. At our last meeting, we had all given feedback to go so that when planning discussed it, they would have some guidance as to the issues that were concerning us. And I had given my comments then, but I have two new ones, so sorry. The first is in the category 2 alternatives that would gain a bonus, would be used towards gaining bonus density, and it's a specific one. It's the alternative that allows credit for doing a shuttle system. And I'd love to hear some discussion at the Planning Commission level of that, the merit of using that as an alternative, insofar as the recent changes in this version that we have introduced in December make it such a constricted universe that it's walkable. All of these sites should be walkable. So I'm not so sure what a shuttle system brings to the table, because now we've drafted this so that the sites are so close to the train stations that you should be able to walk them, and I don't know that having a shuttle system is going to help you at all. And I'd love to hear discussion of that. My second thing that I'd like to hear discussion about is the whole right-of-way issue, and whether the 9 or 8 acres under the overpass count towards, and I've going through all of my documents, I really don't have a good answer, and I would love to hear one perhaps tomorrow night as to whether those 8 acres, in particular on this site, are an integral and integrated portion of the site on which taxes are paid, et cetera. You know, is it a part of their site? Is it considered a part of their site? And so those are the 2 issues that I'd like to hear comment on tomorrow night that will make a difference to me when I'm considering whether we move forward on this on the 27th. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah. Yes, thanks, Elaine. With respect to the shuttle, I understand your point, but it doesn't hurt. I mean, just because you're within 500 feet, you could still want to get on the shuttle anyway. Maybe you have a cane or something.
Well, it only hurts in that they get to use that as one of their alternatives. If they have to use 3. So if you waste one on something that's not that effective, it does hurt in that it's maybe not as effective in promoting transportation.
Well, one of the other things you talked about originally was that the bonus should be required for the base density anyway. So I mean, this whole trigger for bonus is really kind of problematic to begin with, but I guess that makes sense as well in that context. Also, overall, that's my substantive issues are the bonus density is still way too high at the maximum level. So 80% maximum, I think, is too high, and we have to go for a lower number than that. And I think the second ward folks are generally going to agree with that. And the other issue is the one you already mentioned, right away. Right away, irrespective of what we do in other contexts, right away here should not be inclusive in the calculation of your FAR, which is your floor area ratio. I feel very strongly about that, and especially in this case where the right-of-way is already built upon and is not part of the tax parcels that are shown on the Delaware County website. So we can find, also with respect to any right-of-way, it also should be owned by the same legal entity as the main parcel. And it also should be contiguous if it was even going to be considered. But the final thing I would say is, again, I'd love to look at this project on its own instead of in the context of a conditional use ordinance. I don't think the conditional use ordinance is appropriate for this development. So I'm going to keep coming back to that because this is the problem that we have. This is why it takes 18 months. It wouldn't take 18 months if we would just do the project.
Okay, is there any other commissioner comment on the motion to set a hearing date? Is there any staff comment?
I just again, to reiterate that the density of this ordinance with all the density bonuses is less than what is currently permitted under our current regulations in the PLO.
Okay.
Well, there's some dispute as to the way you calculate that. Kevin's opinion and the township's opinion is different from others. And it's a gray area. It's not definitive. It's not black and white.
It is black and white.
It's not. It's not. It's a legal point. It is not black and white.
We can have this discussion at another time. It's not relevant.
Can I ask actually a question to that? Kevin Kachansky has made an opinion as to whether that site could be considered under the original approvals as half lab, half office to all office use. Kevin, could you please send the board, and also the planning commission should have this, the original approvals, any documents from the Board of Commissioners? Because as I recall, the Board of Commissioners, at some point, I don't know if it was, I don't know what the approval process was, but I don't know if it was just under zoning, a zoning decision, or if it was the Board of Commissioners.
I think it was a preliminary plan in 2007, wasn't it?
There were zoning hearing board decisions as well as land development approvals after the zoning hearing board decisions. But with regard to the density, I'm not counting my zoning determination that is currently being appealed. I'm saying the base calculations under current regulations outside of zoning approvals and land development approvals is more under current regulations than what is permitted under this ordinance.
Yeah,
So
and-
that's not
Okay.
subject to opinion, that's fact.
Okay, is there
Yes,
any other staff comment?
But I just want, because what concerns me about that is that the applicant has used, and even in some cases, staff may have used the terminology saying, well, under the current approval, they could have this much office space. And I just want to clarify if we can have those documents for me to read, because I haven't seen them personally, but I understand there was some kind of a determination. I'd like to read that.
Sure, I can provide you the land development plans for that.
Thank you.
And then my zoning determination.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other staff comment? Any public comment? All right, go ahead.
And you thought you were going to go home early from that earlier letter, huh?
I did. Good evening, George Brosman here for Brandywine. I had been here before. I think you reintroduced this twice,
December.
maybe in November for a prior version and December.
Mhm.
I was of the understanding that the Planning Commission, it was stated at those meetings that the Planning Commission was going to be allowed to complete its work, and then you would take it back up and set a hearing date. So we were surprised to see this. What had happened is that on the day before Thanksgiving, the Planning Commission held a special meeting on the prior version of this ordinance. They spent almost 3 hours on that, and they didn't complete their work, and they were going to hold another special meeting on December 5th, a week later. For some reason, that meeting never happened. We never knew why. And they spent a lot of time working on that. We're getting the feedback. And now what seems like is happening, that process was interrupted, and there was yet another draft that you're thinking about setting a hearing on that the Planning Commission has not seen at all. Now, I understand that the draft may be similar, but and may have incorporated certain things and may not have incorporated other things, but they're getting a draft that they officially haven't seen before. They were in the middle of another version. They were working very diligently on that, having special meetings, offering to have more special meetings. And we don't think that you should be setting a hearing date so quickly on that. I think that's going to put pressure on them to feel like they have to rush through it tomorrow, or else the hearing will go ahead. I know there's been talk about it's been taking so long. What I understand has happened, Biomed prepared a couple drafts. Both of those were rejected. The most recent one was rejected sometime in the early fall, as I recall, in September, thereabouts. And it was after that Kevin started working on his draft, which was a completely new draft. So from our way of thinking, really the work on this has really been going on just since September, and the Planning Commission and all the parties have been diligently working on it, and we don't understand why there is a rush to set this hearing date. Unlike the one that you had before, there is no recommendation at all at this point on any ordinance from the Planning Commission. So we ask that you not rush this through, not put that pressure on them, and that you let them finish their work as we were told before, and then set a hearing date at a future time. Thank you.
Thank you for your opinion. Okay, any other public comment?
Matt Marshall, 228 Walnut Avenue. And I guess I'll just voice concerns that I've heard from both Commissioner Fisher and from Commissioner Booker this evening. What's the rush? I mean, what are we trying to get here other than an amendment to some zoning language that has worked for us in this township for as long as I can remember. I'm really concerned that we're usurping a process of boards and advisory committees that just don't seem to make any sense. To me, it possibly has other motivations, but I've heard the citizens and I've heard some of the opposing views tonight, and I just don't understand why we're pushing so hard here. We know, based on some experiences, that some of these ordinances are in place for good reason, and we start tweaking them and bad things happen. Not only happen to commercial and institutional entities, but to residential entities. So let's slow it down. I just don't understand why we think that we can do this without the good advice and good oversight of some of the planners and some of the residents who've lived here for their entire lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Patty Barker, Rosemont. I just wanted to echo what Matt said, because that's exactly what I was thinking. What's the rush for both of these ordinances? And John Fisher made a very good point. I was going to get up and say it myself. Garrett Hill, you all know Garrett Hill, teeny tiny Garrett Hill, took 2.5 years, 2.5 years to pass our Garrett Hill zoning district ordinances. We were at planning 6 times. We were at Delaware County planning 6 times. I'm just stupefied. So, thanks, but what is the rush?
Thank you, Patty.
Just to reiterate, this plan has been very similar. The drafts somewhat different, but the whole process has been the same. Planning Commission first saw this on August 7th, 2012. The Board of Commissioners first heard about this on May 21st, 2012. The Planning Commission's already had this matter 6 different occasions, 7 being tomorrow evening. We feel we need some guidance as to where this ordinance is going. Is it going to be approved, not approved? And of course, we recommend that you set a hearing date so we can work toward it. And if the Planning Commission comes up with other recommendations, this board does not have to approve the plan, or can either set a new hearing date or with the new recommendations. So, we request that you set the hearing date now and that we work towards that. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote. Commissioner Nagel? And this is on the motion to set a hearing date for ordinance 2013-20 of January 27th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes 4-3, and the hearing date is set. And I would just like to finish this discussion by noting that the hearing will not occur if we haven't gotten our feedback from Planning Commission. It will be continued or it will be rescheduled. We're prophylactically putting it there in case it's completely recommended or without changes, or we decide not to take those changes.
So they're in control then?
Point of order.
They're in control of what happens.
That was not in the motion. So the hearing date has been set.
Yeah.
So there's no implication that if we don't get something back from the Planning Commission that hearing won't occur. So should that be part of the motion? So Elaine, I'm just being honest.
I don't think we should invite the Planning Commission to hold up the process by sitting on the documents and their deliberations so that our hearing date comes and goes without their input. I don't think we should let them do that.
Well, don't you think that perhaps this does put more pressure on the Planning Commission to go through this than they might otherwise have taken, objectively?
I don't think the Planning Commission, I think they're going to follow the process that they think is right. That's what they've done all along, and I would assume and respectfully hope that they do that, continue to do so. All right, so we have already voted on that ordinance, and that hearing date, and it's time to move on to Public Works and Engineering. Commissioner Higgins, would you like to
Yes,
introduce the only item?
First item is Resolution Number 2014-04. Our Public Works and Engineering Department has a proposal before us to authorize the purchase of a number of vehicles and equipment for over the course of the next 5 years. I think it is 5 years. Steve Norsini, could you explain further?
Thank you, Commissioner. I know it's late. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So, excuse me, the Board of Commissioners adopted the 2014 budget in December 16th of 2013. Part of that budget was a 5-year capital plan. 2 sheets from that plan were included with your packet. And what I am requesting for the Public Works and Engineering Department tonight is the authorization to move forward with the purchase of the vehicles and equipment that are noted in the capital plan. That's also laid out on Exhibit A. That's 12 pieces of equipment. And really, the reason for asking for this at one time is just for expediency's sake, so we don't keep coming back to the board. A few of these items are lease purchase, so we'll have to work with the Finance Department on their RFP and pricing. Some of the other ones are much easier to obtain. All this equipment would be obtained through purchasing cooperatives, whether co-stars or state bid, and we actually would work with the police on some of theirs. I can quickly run through the list if you wish.
I think we can read it.
Okay.
I have one question, or actually it's more of a request. And that is the very last item, which is a engineering sedan or SUV. And my request would just be that when it comes time to purchase that the green team is involved. That seems to be the one vehicle that, that's probably not doing any towing.
Yeah.
And that should be a hybrid or an electric or something of that sort, upon the recommendation of our green team.
Absolutely.
Okay?
And Steve, you're predicting obsolescence or...
No, everything that's being replaced is obsolete.
Oh,
the trash truck is a 1998. It's 16 years old. It's about 4 years past its useful life.
Okay.
The one dump truck is 17 years old. It's 5 years past its useful life. So all these are replacement of vehicles that are well past their time and that we spend a lot of money trying to keep running.
Okay, do we have any other commissioner comments or questions? Any staff comment? Any public comment? I'm going to go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Item I has been removed from the agenda. Finance and Audit, Commissioner Fisher, do you have anything?
No report.
Parks and Recreation, Commissioner Nagel.
A couple things coming up that I'd encourage folks to check the website for. One is the Daddy-Daughter Dance, which was a big success last year. It's going to be at the Radnor Hotel this time. There's also Mystery Dinner Theater that we did before. Again, that will be at the Willows. And we're going to have fireworks, and I think that's the same night as the Mystery Dinner Theater. But if you check the website, you'll see it. And that's the fireworks we had to cancel in the fall, Bob. And I know people are going to say, it's cold. I have no sympathy. New Year's Eve, I was out standing on the Delaware River waterfront taking pictures of the fireworks in Philadelphia at midnight. It was 28 degrees. No sympathy.
Thank you, John. Library, we have a new appointee to the, as chair of the Library Committee, and that's Commissioner Booker. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
No report.
And Public Health, Commissioner Nagel.
Earlier, we had discussed the Board of Health recommendations about the deer. That's the only thing I would have for this time.
The geese. Okay, any old business? Any new business?
Yes, I had a request from a constituent today, Bob, about the new rates for permit parking on our residential streets. This lady is elderly and on limited income and was asking whether we have any flexibility for her to have an adjustment, Chief, on the new fee for permit parking, which is now up to 25. I think it had been 10, maybe 15.
Yes, Commissioner. In fact, under the orders of the Township Manager, we're working on drafting an ordinance where people 65 and over would get a discounted rate for parking permits, and you'll get that shortly.
Oh, she'll be very happy with that.
That Sarah Pilling actually was the one that recommended that through an email to myself, Commissioner Fisher, and the Township Manager over the holidays, and we agreed that that should be done.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other new business? Any public participation? Can I have a motion for adjournment?
Move we adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.